Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Web Between Us, by CherryQuill. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin chapter 1. 2 months ago. One field trip. One spider. That's all it took. They were visiting Oscorp's genetics division just another Thursday for the university's freshman science cohort. Izuku Midoriya kept to the back of the group, scribbling notes, eyes wide, and when the spider bit him, no one noticed. It had escaped its containment, a genetically altered prototype, something about neural rewiring in silk production. No one saw it sink its fangs into his wrist. The venom burned like fire, his whole world shifted, and suddenly gravity meant nothing and his skin stuck to windows. It should have been a dream come true, except no one ever tells you what it costs to be a hero. It started with burning. Not metaphorical. Literal, searing pain. His hand kept twitching. The bite throbbed. Then the fever came, crushing, wet, dizzying. He hallucinated clinging to walls, his skin pulsing with heat, his muscles twitching in impossible ways. And then he woke up. Hanging sideways from his dorm ceiling. No HRNSS. No suction cups. Just his fingertips. Fused to concrete like a second skin. He screamed and then fell. Hit the floor hard enough to bruise. That's when the first web shot out of his wrist. It was fast, instinctive. He watched it float in the air, silver and shimmering, anchored to the ceiling. He didn't sleep for 2 days after that. And it wasn't just the webbing. His body changed. Faster reflexes. Stronger grip. Better hearing. He could feel vibrations through floors. Could walk barefoot across slick glass and never slip. He didn't get sick anymore. Cuts healed faster. His muscles ached in new ways, like they were always half-coiled, waiting to move. He kept it hidden. Covered the scars. Built bracers to catch the web fluid when it leaked. Said nothing when lab partners commented on how his hands always twitched now. By day, he was a broke, caffeine-powered science student. On full scholarship. Always half asleep. TAs knew him as the kid who practically lived in the physics lab. No life. By night. He was something else. Tokyo's masked problem. An urban myth. A vigilante in a suit with police scanners patched into his phone. No name at first. No fame. Then the news gave him one. Spider-Man. He didn't stop for credit. Didn't pose for photos. He just did what needed to be done. Stopped robberies. Helped lost kids. Pulled strangers out of alleyways and patched them up on rooftops. He learned the names of every block between Shibuya and Ikebukuro, every shortcut through construction zones, every hiding place behind billboards and water towers. He didn't have a cape. No glory. No press conferences. Just one kid, one promise, and too many sleepless nights. He was the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man kind, relentless, smart-mouthed, always a little late to class, with a desperate need to help. Because he remembered what it felt like when the cops didn't come. When the screams went unanswered. When his Uncle Toshi needed help and there was none to be found. He just couldn't let someone else face that same fate. So he became Spider-Man. And everything was under control. Or, it was. The scent of eggs and burnt toast drifted into Izuku's nose before his brain fully rebooted. It was the smell of home, not his dorm, but real home. The one with too many notebooks and a fridge covered in hero stickers and a mom who still called him baby. A groggy groan escaped his throat as he rolled over, face pressing into a pillow still damp from sweat. His shoulder flared in pain from last night's incident on the Marunouchi line. Tight quarters. Screaming passengers. And one very persistent individual. He winced, blinking crusted sleep from his eyes. Zuku, breakfast's ready. His mom called from the kitchen. He sat up too fast. I'm up. He croaked, instantly regretting the move. He rubbed his eyes and glanced at the digital clock. 7:12 a.m. Midoriya Izuku, a dedicated physics student and part-time vigilante, scrambled to find his phone, nearly tumbling out of bed in the process. It was buried beneath a crumpled hoodie and yesterday's costume. With only 1 bar of battery left, he noticed 3 missed calls from Ida and 1 from Uraraka. He was going to be late. Again. He rushed into the bathroom and caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror, wild green curls, a small cut on his lower lip, and dark circles under his eyes that hinted at sleepless nights. His mom would definitely notice. After a quick splash of cold water and an aggressive brushing of his teeth, he hurried out. Inko Midoriya was already preparing breakfast: eggs, miso soup, rice, and a slice of toast that was slightly overcooked. The TV was on low, showing muted images of chaotic security footage from the train station. A masked figure, Spider-Man, was seen tackling a man on the platform, webbing him to a lamppost just before a train rushed by. The media still referred to him as alleged. "Good morning, Mom." Izuku greeted as he entered the room. She turned to smile at him. "Good morning, baby," she replied, her expression shifting slightly as she noticed his limp. "You're limping," she observed gently. He hesitated. "Huh? Oh. Yeah. Dropped a box of lab equipment yesterday. Banged my knee." Inko didn't press further, but her smile dimmed a little as she returned to the stove in silence. Izuku sat down slowly, grateful for the chair. The table was set with his favorite meal. His mom always cooked for him when he stayed over, even though he was in college now and insisted he could manage on his own. But she sensed something was off. Izuku was always tired, his mind often elsewhere. There were the bruises, the small cuts, and the guilt that lingered. "How's the physics professor? The one with the mustache?" Inko asked, ladling soup into her bowl. Izuku blinked. "Oh, Professor Nakamura. He's fine. Still doesn't think much of me." She chuckled softly, but it quickly faded. "You've been pushing yourself again, haven't you?" Izuku swallowed a spoonful of soup too quickly, feeling it burn his throat. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really? Just midterms." She didn't respond immediately, sitting across from him with her hands tightly folded. "I know. But I just wish you'd take care of yourself, too." Izuku's fingers curled around hers for a brief moment, holding on before pulling away. He mumbled something about being late, threw on his hoodie, grabbed his backpack, and leaned over to kiss her forehead on his way out the door. "Love you, Mom," he called. "Be safe, Izuku," she urged softly, her voice filled with concern. "Please." "I will." Then he was off again, earbuds in place, half jogging toward the station. As the city blurred past him, he wondered if he could make it through the day without any trouble. He should have known better. The lecture hall was packed by the time he arrived 15 minutes late, panting, shoulders sore under his bag's weight. He slipped into the back row, head down, unnoticed like always. The room buzzed with quiet chatter, no one paying him any mind until he noticed someone new sitting in the front. Second row, second seat from the aisle. Relaxed posture, black uniform. Spiky blonde hair that seemed to defy gravity. No. It couldn't be. Katsuki Bakugo. He looked older, sharper, his face set with determination. But those red eyes still burned, the same ones that had glared at Izuku in the hallway the day they last spoke. The day Katsuki told him vigilantes were cowards. The day Izuku knew he couldn't ever come clean. Katsuki didn't glance back, didn't seem to notice him. But Izuku noticed everything: the Ground Zero security patch on his sleeve, the license tucked into the lanyard around his neck, the little scar on his jaw that hadn't been there 3 years ago. The urge to panic crept up Izuku's throat. His pulse roared in his ears, fingers trembling. What was Katsuki doing here? He had left 3 years ago for Ground Zero's elite combat training program, one of Tokyo's big-name corporate enforcers. They worked around the cops, often above them. Hunted vigilantes. He basically disappeared from Izuku's life, and now here he was. No warning. Katsuki turned his head slightly, catching movement in his peripheral vision. Their eyes met, and Izuku's breath caught in his throat. There was no recognition in Katsuki's expression. Just a quiet narrowing of his eyes. A flicker. Then nothing. Izuku stumbled into the nearest seat, heartbeat loud in his ears. His fingers trembled as he pulled out his notebook, flipping to a random page. He didn't hear a word the professor said for the next 40 minutes. Because Katsuki Bakugo, his childhood friend, his worst heartbreak, and the man who once swore to hunt down every masked vigilante in the city, was sitting less than 10 feet away from him. And Izuku wasn't sure if that weight in his chest was dread. If Katsuki looked too closely, if he caught the smallest slip, a bruised hand, a familiar posture, he'd know. Oh, he'd definitely know. He was not okay. Not when class ended. Not when his notebook was still half filled with equations he barely registered. Not when his knees felt unsteady as he rose from his seat and saw him walking over. Every neuron in his brain lit up, screaming a name he hadn't said out loud in years. Kaken. It pulsed through his body like a siren. Loud. Merciless. Inescapable. He hadn't seen Katsuki since middle school, since Aldera Junior High. Since that day he limped home with bruises under his sleeves and silence pressing against his ribs. Since the last hallway brawl, the last slammed locker, the last crack of knuckles against bone. Since the last time he looked into red-rimmed, furious eyes and felt 1,000 things he couldn't explain. They never said goodbye. Not in words. Just in bruises and unspoken truths and a silence that stretched years wide. And now, there he was. A ghost in combat boots. Striding into his 9 a.m. quantum physics class like he belonged. Like he hadn't disappeared from Izuku's life, like a meteor crashing through the atmosphere. Still Katsuki. Still fire. Still the center of every storm Izuku had tried to outrun. So, Izuku didn't hesitate. He bolted. Notebook clutched to his chest like a shield, bag half-zipped, breath short. He slipped out of the lecture hall fast enough to draw a few confused glances from his classmates. But he didn't care. He couldn't care. He made it 3 steps into the corridor before he heard it. That voice. Oi, Deku. The old nickname landed like a punch to the gut and a weight on his chest all at once. The voice deeper now, rougher but still sharp, still familiar. It made Izuku's spine lock up. He turned slowly, like someone peeling open a wound. Katsuki stood just inches away, looking more handsome than anyone had a right to. Shoulders squared, a presence that made people step aside. And his eyes still watching, still dissecting, still seeing too much. Done checking me out? Katsuki asked, raising a brow. Excuse me. No, Izuku's throat was dry, his brain short-circuiting. He cleared his throat. Didn't expect to see you here, Kaken. Katsuki paused, just for a second. Like the name hit somewhere he didn't guard well enough. Then he scoffed, shrugging it off like it meant nothing. Clearly, he said, eyes flicking down at the notebook in Izuku's shaking hands. You look like you've been through it. The bluntness hit hard. Izuku huffed a breath, the corner of his mouth twitching with something like exhausted sarcasm. Thanks. You look like you got recruited by a secret organization. Katsuki snorted. It's Ground Zero. We're not villains. You said that like you rehearsed it. Yeah. We get asked that a lot. That hung in the air a beat too long. The silence between them stretched thin. Izuku couldn't breathe. Not properly. Not with the weight of every old bruise and half-swallowed apology ghosting between them. What are you even doing here? He asked, unable to keep the edge out of his voice. I thought you were out saving the world. I got transferred, Katsuki replied, voice even. GZS wants me studying urban analytics, low visibility ops. Something about field crossover with public infrastructure and law enforcement. He shrugged. I didn't ask. I go where they tell me. Great. Awesome. So we're classmates again, CRP. Katsuki's gaze lingered, intense and calculating. Yeah. I guess. There was something in the way he said it, something unreadable. Not anger. Not contempt. More like calculation. Izuku's pulse hammered in his throat. He had to go. Before Katsuki asked more questions. Before he looked too close and saw everything Izuku was trying to keep buried under textbooks. Well, I've got a lab meeting, Izuku lied, already turning. Katsuki didn't stop him. But just as Izuku was walking away, his voice followed. Low, calm, almost casual. Also to find that spider freak. Izuku stopped cold. His foot hung mid-step. But Katsuki wasn't done. He said it like an afterthought. Like it meant nothing. But every syllable landed with precision. Last sighting was just a few blocks from campus. Rooftop security cam caught him 2 nights ago. Izuku turned back slightly, doing his best to stay composed. Yeah. I heard. He forced a shaky smile. Well, gotta go, Kaken. It was nice seeing you again. Was it? And then he walked fast. Not quite a sprint, but close. Each step was a careful attempt not to succumb to panic. His fingers twitched, instinctively gripping the strap of his backpack tightly. The hallway around him blurred footsteps, scattered voices, a door creaking open somewhere, but it all faded beneath the pounding of his own heartbeat. Katsuki said nothing else, and Izuku didn't dare to look back. He kept moving, not letting go of that strap until he was halfway across campus. Izuku. Uraraka's voice cut through the crowd, and before Izuku could brace himself, she was flying toward him. She collided with him, arms wrapping tightly around his shoulders in a hug that nearly knocked the breath from his lungs. He stumbled slightly, letting out a breathless sound somewhere between a wheeze and a laugh. I've been texting you all morning, she said quietly, pulling back just enough to search his face. What happened? Are you okay? You weren't answering, you look pale, you're sweating. Wait, did you get hit by a bus? Izuku's smile was weak. Worse, he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. Kaken transferred in. The world around them seemed to freeze for a moment. Uraraka and Ida, who had appeared out of nowhere, both went rigid. The color drained from Uraraka's face, and Ida's jaw tightened. Kaken. Uraraka repeated, her voice quiet and her eyes blinking hard. As in your middle school, Kaken. The very same, Izuku muttered, glancing nervously toward the path he had come from, as if Katsuki might appear at any moment. And he's part of Ground Zero security. Ida's brows furrowed behind his glasses. This complicates things tremendously. Uraraka turned to him, worry mounting. He doesn't know, right? Tell me he doesn't know. Izuku hesitated. I don't think so, he said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. But he said something about finding Spider-Man and being spotted near campus 2 nights ago. The words lingered in the air. Ida exhaled sharply and crossed his arms, his voice dropping. If Bakugo even suspects you, Midoriya, we're not just talking about embarrassment or awkward reunions. He's a trained pro. He'll act. He's not the type to hesitate. Izuku looked down, his jaw tight. I know, he said quietly. Believe me. I know. Uraraka laid a soft hand on his arm, grounding him. You have to be careful, she said, her eyes serious. If he starts digging, if he gets even a hint, it's not just your identity at risk. Your mom, your future. Everything. Izuku nodded once, feeling the weight of their words. It was easy to forget, sometimes around Uraraka's laughter or Ida's structured calm, that they were the only ones who knew. The only two people who had seen him not just behind the mask, but vulnerable beneath it. It had happened a month ago during a study session. He had missed their study session in Uraraka's dorm, citing a vague excuse about a research emergency. But that night, a crash echoed through the dorm hallway like thunder. Their dorm rooms were lined up in a row, Izuku's at the very end, with Uraraka's next to his, and Ida's beside hers. So they definitely heard it. "I think someone just fell off the third floor," Uraraka had whispered, half joking, as they peeked out from behind her door. "I doubt that," Ida replied in his usual analytical tone, raising a finger. "The dorm was structurally reinforced last year to withstand weight, is that BLD?" A trail, small but unmistakable, led to room 112, Izuku's room. Uraraka blinked. "Should we knock?" Ida adjusted his glasses with a grim expression. "Ethically, yes. But morally, I'm opening this door." And he did. What they found was something between horrifying and surreal. Izuku stood in the middle of his room, bruised and trying to peel off a torn, soot-stained suit. A mask clenched between his teeth, his hair stuck to his forehead with sweat, his expression one of pure panic. Uraraka, ever the optimist, blinked and asked, "Are you cosplaying?" Izuku flinched, crashing sideways into his open closet. The door swung shut behind him with a loud bang. From inside came a muffled, "It's not what it looks like." There was a long beat of silence. "Okay, it's exactly what it looks like." Then Ida nodded once. "I knew it. Your metabolism made no sense." Uraraka snorted, grinning. "I told you Deku was too agile for a normal nerd." From that night on, they knew. They kept his secret like it was sacred. Because beneath all the anxiety and caffeine and messy notes, their friend was the masked vigilante the Tokyo PD had been hunting for 2 months, the same figure caught in shaky footage taking down arms dealers in alleyways, rescuing crash victims on the expressway, then disappearing into the skyline like smoke. And now, Katsuki Bakugo, smart, fierce, and stubborn, was here. With combat training, tactical clearance, and an instinct for when something didn't add up. Izuku leaned against the vending machine, feeling drained. His whole life was a fragile ecosystem of lies and timing. And Katsuki. He was the bull in the china shop. And Izuku was the porcelain. Later that night, the city below gleamed, seemingly unbothered by the chaos that loomed beneath its surface. Neon signs flickered, and taxis drifted through intersections, making it easy to pretend everything was fine. Izuku wore a new suit, sleek, matte black with deep green accents that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. It was a far cry from the clunky red prototype he had started with, which had struggled to hold up during missions. Uraraka still teased him about that old suit. His fingers tensed on the ledge as he tried not to think about earlier, about Katsuki and the way he had looked at him, as if he could see right through the mask. The earpiece clicked in his ear. Robbery in progress. Hostages on site. 3rd and Shiba. SWAT ETA, 7 minutes. Izuku was already on the move. "Too long," he muttered, launching himself forward without hesitation. He moved like a shadow across the city, vaulting over ledges and swinging around buildings. By the time he arrived, chaos had already unraveled. A small neighborhood mart had its front shattered, with people hiding behind overturned shelves and 4 armed suspects shouting over each other. He landed silently on the roof and scanned the scene. One gun was aimed at a hostage. There was no time to waste. He sprinted across the skylight and dropped through, shattering glass around him. Mid-air, he snatched a rifle with webbing and flung it out of reach. "What's up, guys?" he called out, delivering a fluid kick that sent one suspect sprawling into the dairy section. "It's Spider-Man," someone yelled. Another suspect tried to flee, but Izuku webbed him mid-step, pulling him flat. The last raised his gun toward a terrified girl until Izuku lobbed a web grenade that exploded in a net, pinning him to the frozen goods. Silence followed, filled only with ragged breathing and quiet sobs. Izuku crouched beside the cashier, his voice gentle behind the mask. "You're safe now. You're okay." Suddenly, the front entrance blew apart, and in stormed Katsuki Bakugo, looking like a war machine in motion. His heavy boots echoed across the tile, and his gauntlets glowed faintly with stored energy. His eyes locked onto Izuku. "Step away from the civilians, Spider." Izuku rose slowly, careful and measured. The modulator masked his voice, but his hands weren't steady. "You're late." "What did you say?" "I mean," Izuku shrugged exaggeratedly, "you missed all the action. You want me to put everything back so you can try again." Katsuki's mouth curled into a smirk. "Didn't ask for backup." "I'm not backup." "Then why the hell are you in my city?" Izuku tilted his head. "Your city. You think this is a game? Swing in, play hero, and vanish. You're interfering with pro operations. That makes you a threat." Izuku's spine stiffened. "Suspects neutralized. No injuries. You're welcome. I don't need some amateur messing with my scenes." "I'm not an amateur." Katsuki's voice dropped. "Then take off the mask." Izuku went still. "Let's see if the law agrees with your little vigilante routine." Sorry, kinda camera shy," Izuku replied in a playful tone. Katsuki narrowed his eyes, and Izuku took a step back, feeling the tension rise. He didn't wait. A flick of his wrist sent a web to the ceiling, and he launched upward, vanishing into the rafters just as Katsuki lunged. Seconds later, he was gone, leaving only glass shards and smoke behind. From a rooftop across the street, Izuku crouched low, watching through his visor. Below, Katsuki took control with brutal efficiency, issuing orders and managing the scene. He was good. Too good. Then, Katsuki looked up, right at the rooftop where Izuku had landed. Izuku's stomach dropped, and he slipped back into the shadows, pulse racing. If Katsuki had started to suspect, it was only a matter of time before he caught on. And when that day came, Izuku wouldn't be ready. Not for him. Not for what that would mean. Morning came far too fast. Izuku hadn't slept, not really. He returned to his dorm just before sunrise, stashing his gear away and letting his mask dry on the towel rack. He dressed quietly and slipped out before anyone else stirred, needing fresh air and a moment to think. But when he reached campus, Uraraka was already there, waiting by the vending machines with oversized headphones. She caught his arm. "You ghosted us again, Deku." "I don't even," she hissed. "You said you'd avoid him." "I tried. You dropped through a skylight and beat up 4 armed guys while Bakugo stormed in through the front door." Izuku winced. "That's a dramatic way of putting it." "You webbed a man to the frozen peas, Deku." Across the garden, Ida jogged toward them, looking concerned. "Midoriya. You look horrible." "Thanks." Uraraka crossed her arms. "He's gonna figure it out. He's already looking at you weird." "He doesn't know it's me," Izuku whispered. "But he suspects something," Ida said grimly. "His instincts are sharp. He's going to chase this. And when he does?" Uraraka asked. "What then?" Izuku stared out at the quad, where students were filtering in, chatting about internships and the Ground Zero sighting from the night before. Katsuki's name was everywhere, but no one connected it to Izuku. "Not yet. I'll stay ahead," he said softly. "I always have." Later that afternoon, the worst possible thing happened. No, Izuku didn't trip in front of the whole campus again. No, Spider-Man footage didn't go viral with a silly caption. It was worse. He walked into Applied Kinetics' room tired and jittery only for Professor Nakamura to clap her hands and announce, "New partners for the semester project. This will be your final paper and prototype 50% of your grade." Izuku's stomach dropped. He didn't even hear the rest of her speech because right after that, Midoriya and Bakugo. Izuku actually blacked out for a second. When he blinked back to reality, Uraraka had turned around in her seat, wide-eyed, as if to say, "Are you about to throw up or burst into flames?" Ida looked shocked and Katsuki just leaned back in his chair, smirking like someone had dared him. Izuku sat very still. "This is fine," he told himself. "Okay. This is not fine. So you're left-handed now?" Katsuki asked, raising an eyebrow. Izuku blinked in surprise. "What?" Katsuki pointed at the way Izuku was holding the pen. "You used to write with your right." Izuku glanced at the pen in his hand. Old habit." He was careful to keep his bruised knuckles hidden. He didn't want Katsuki to notice, especially not now. Katsuki dragged a stool over and plopped down, glaring at the shared screen as if it had offended him. The tension in the air was thick, and Izuku could feel his heart racing. This was fine. This was great. No pressure at all. His childhood rival, now part of a private security firm and currently suspicious of Spider-Man, was sitting just a few feet away. "Okay," Izuku said, pulling up the project brief. "We need to build a working model of kinetic to electric energy conversion. There's a schematic template we can follow, or we can design our own system." "Obviously we're designing our own," Katsuki replied flatly. "Right," Izuku muttered. "Obviously." Katsuki cracked his knuckles and leaned in. "We'll use magnetic induction. Convert impact energy directly. Something compact. Minimal loss." Izuku couldn't help but glance sideways. "Kaken, you're good at this." Katsuki shot him a glare. "I'm not an idiot, nerd. I didn't say you were. You thought it." Izuku rolled his eyes. "God, you're still impossible." Katsuki shrugged. "And you're still twitchy." "I do not twitch." "You twitch. With your face." "I don't even know what that means." Katsuki looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, Izuku felt the weight of his gaze. There was something intense in it. Not quite hostile, not friendly. It felt like Katsuki was waiting for something to happen. Izuku turned away first. "Anyway," he muttered, clicking through files. "We need to finalize the design proposal by Friday. We'll finish it in 2 days. You don't even know my schedule, don't need to." "Wow," Izuku said, shaking his head. "Still the most humble guy I know." "DMN right." Then, unexpectedly, Katsuki said, "Deku." Izuku looked up, startled. "What?" Katsuki leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "What do you think of Spider-Man?" Izuku blinked, his heart racing. "Huh. I said." Katsuki's tone was casual, but Izuku could sense the underlying tension. "What do you think of that masked guy swinging around Tokyo?" Izuku's mind raced. "Stay calm. Play it cool. I mean," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "The media's all over the place, right? Depends on which channel you watch." Katsuki's eyes narrowed. "That's not what I asked." Izuku's throat felt dry. "Are you asking as a guy who works security or just curious? Answer the question." His hands clenched under the table. Then Katsuki spoke, his voice low and bitter. "I think he's a coward." Izuku flinched. Katsuki leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "He hides behind a mask. Acts like a brat, breaks laws, takes justice into his own hands. Meanwhile, real people get caught in the crossfire. Real people suffer." Izuku opened his mouth but closed it again. He knew Katsuki was angry, but this felt personal. Katsuki's eyes were hard. You know my dad died in a vigilante crossfire. Years ago. Some masked guy thought he could take on a villain in a residential area. Didn't care who was nearby. He missed. The villain didn't. Izuku felt a weight in his chest. Yeah, I remember. Katsuki's voice was sharp. They called it a tragedy. Said the guy was trying to help. Know what I call it? Izuku stayed silent. I call it nonsense. Silence hung between them. Katsuki stared at the diagram again, avoiding Izuku's gaze. You wear a mask, you think it gives you the right to decide who lives or dies. It doesn't. Izuku's jaw tightened. That's a little harsh. No, Katsuki snapped, that's reality. Izuku couldn't respond. If he opened his mouth, he wasn't sure what would come out. The silence lingered until Katsuki scoffed and returned to the diagram, pretending to study the schematic on the tablet. Forget it. Izuku sat frozen, feeling the tension. Did Katsuki suspect something? Was he testing him? He swallowed hard, forcing himself to focus on the blueprints. The numbers blurred as he tightened his grip on the pencil. Then, half an hour into their work, Katsuki suddenly stood up. Stay, he commanded. Izuku blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me. You'll mess it up without me. I'm getting coffee. Before Izuku could respond, Katsuki was gone. He stared after him, feeling a flutter in his chest, reminiscent of their middle school days. 5 minutes passed before Katsuki returned, expression flat, but this time he was holding 2 cups. Too much sugar. The way you like it. He tossed one toward Izuku without looking. Izuku fumbled the cup. Excuse you, I don't have diabetes. His face flushed. Katsuki didn't look up, already back in his chair, flipping open the schematic. Start with the induction coil. Izuku huffed, flustered, holding the cup as if it had insulted him. Still, thanks, I guess. Katsuki glanced up for a moment. He didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either. Whatever, nerd. Izuku felt a mix of emotions. After all these years, after all the silence, Katsuki still remembered how he took his coffee too sweet, a little milk. It felt normal, like they hadn't spent years apart. But he could sense Katsuki watching him not like a partner, but like a predator. Katsuki knew something was off. But Izuku didn't flinch this time. He glanced up for just a second and found himself captivated. It was unfair, he thought, that someone forged in fire and fury could still look like sunlight breaking through a war zone. He quickly looked away, pretending to reread the same line. You're staring, nerd. Izuku nearly dropped his pen. And no, I wasn't. Katsuki snorted without looking up. You're terrible at lying. Time to change the subject. Izuku shoved the tablet toward Katsuki a little too hard and cleared his throat. Anyway, Kaken, we have to finish this. Do you want to review the coil specs, or just stare and insult my typing speed for the rest of the hour? Katsuki didn't answer. He leaned in slowly, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on Izuku's face as if trying to decipher a complex code. Izuku focused on the schematic displayed on the screen, avoiding any further eye contact with Katsuki for the remainder of the class. He feared that if he looked up, he might reveal just how close Katsuki was to uncovering his secrets. It was a risk he couldn't afford to take, especially with Katsuki Bakugo sitting just 3 feet away and closing the distance with each passing moment. After class, Katsuki walked with Izuku, his eyes scanning Izuku's notes, a chaotic mess of scribbled formulas, half-coded algorithms, and annotations that somehow still made perfect sense. He paused at the color-coded sections, the arrows linking concepts, and the tiny sketches explaining motion patterns in the margins. Messy as always, you're like a toddler, Katsuki muttered, but your note structure's fine. Izuku blinked, surprised. Wait. Was that a compliment? Don't push it. Izuku smiled, just a little. I'll take it. Katsuki glanced at him for a moment, but then looked away. Later, nerd. He walked off down the hall. Izuku stared after him, feeling his heart thud against something he couldn't name. Outside, Uraraka and Ida were waiting. Ida adjusted his glasses. You're flushed. Are you injured? No, I'm fine, Izuku replied too quickly. So how bad was it? Uraraka asked. He asked what I thought about Spider-Man, Izuku muttered. Gave me coffee like it was normal. Mocked my penmanship. Complimented my diagrams by accident. So survivable. Izuku sighed. He's watching me. Wait, pause. He gave you a what? Uraraka blinked. A coffee. Ida frowned. That sounds oddly civil for Bakugo. Exactly, Izuku muttered. Uraraka leaned in, squinting. What kind? Izuku hesitated. 2. Sweet. A little milk. Hazelnut latte. There was a pause. Then Uraraka and Ida spoke at the same time. Your usual order. Izuku stiffened. I mean, maybe he just guessed. Uraraka looked scandalized. He barely remembers half our classmates' names, Ida said, borderline offended. He calls me Four Eyes. Uraraka rolled her eyes. Pink cheeks here. Izuku was rapidly going redder. See, can we not make this a thing, please? Ida crossed his arms. I'm simply saying, remembering your exact coffee preference after years of minimal contact implies intentional memory retention. That's practically affectionate. Izuku looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Stop using science against me. Uraraka bit her lip, trying not to laugh. We're just saying, someone's watching you closer than you think. But Izuku knew. He'd handed that coffee without looking, but he knew. The moment their fingers brushed, Katsuki was testing him. Watching for a twitch. A slip. A giveaway. You have to be extra careful, Ida said seriously. The closer he gets, the harder it'll be to lie. Izuku didn't answer. Because deep down, he wasn't sure how much of this still felt like lying and how much of it was something else entirely. Something sharp. Something warm. Something terrifying. It wasn't just guilt anymore. It was the way Katsuki watched him, quiet, calculating, like he was putting pieces together. It was the silence between their conversations that spoke louder than words. It was the fact that Katsuki still remembered how he took his coffee. Still called him Deku and nerd. Still lingered after class just a little too long. Izuku wasn't just hiding Spider-Man. He was hiding the fact that part of him didn't want to run. Didn't want to disappear. Didn't want to lose that look in Katsuki's eyes, the one that flickered, just for a second, with something like the past. Like before all this. Because no matter how dangerous it was, part of him still felt that same gravity toward Katsuki. The pull he'd never admitted out loud. He'd always admired him even when he hated how he was treated. Even when they were just boys on opposite sides of everything. Izuku, Ida said carefully. Are you hearing us? I'm fine, Izuku replied too quickly, his voice thin. I've got it under control. Uraraka gave him a look that said so without a word. Just be careful, she repeated. Not just with your mask. With your heart, too. Izuku froze. I'm going on patrol. At daylight. Ida blinked. I need air. Izuku looked away. Because the closer Katsuki got, the more he felt the ground slip under him, and he didn't know if he was falling into danger, or something more terrifying. Dorms were supposed to be safe. Supposed to be free of tall, blonde, walking explosions with licensed egos and too good instincts. So naturally, Katsuki Bakugo ended up assigned the room right across the hall. Of course he did. Izuku stared at the door across from his, as if sheer willpower could make it disappear. It didn't. Instead, it opened and there he was. Katsuki. Gray shirt, loose joggers, a protein bar in hand like he'd just stepped off a magazine cover and into Izuku's personal nightmare. Izuku's brain promptly broke. Oh no. Oh no, he looks good. Like, really good. He scrambled to remember how to blink. This was not helping. He was supposed to be hiding a double life, not staring like Katsuki had been sculpted out of gym hours. They locked eyes. Katsuki took a slow bite of the protein bar still holding eye contact. "You good, nerd?" he asked through the chew. Izuku flinched. "Why yeah. Great. Fantastic." He gave a thumbs up that immediately made him want to drop out of school. "'Cause you're just standing there like a freak." "Just thinking," Izuku muttered, forcing his legs to move. Katsuki narrowed his eyes. "Try doing that quieter." The door shut. Izuku exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding and almost laughed. There was something oddly comforting about the chaos Katsuki brought. Like gravity reasserting itself. But still, it was going to be a long semester. Later that night 11:47 p.m. the city was restless, and so was Izuku. His suit was already on silent, matte black with emerald circuitry pulsing softly under his skin. He cracked the window open and climbed out onto the fire escape, breath frosting the air. Just a quick patrol to shake off the nerves and clear his head. He'd be back before anyone noticed. As he reached the edge of the rooftop, a door swung open from a neighboring building. Izuku whipped around, instincts on high alert. There, on the adjacent rooftop, stood Katsuki, dressed in dark workout clothes, phone in one hand, scowl on his face. He was alone, talking to someone too far to hear clearly, but his voice carried in short bursts. Izuku ducked into the shadows, heart hammering in his chest. What was Katsuki doing out here at midnight? Katsuki paced the edge of the roof like he was waiting for something or someone. Then his eyes snapped up. Izuku froze. For one breathless second, their eyes locked across the rooftop divide. Katsuki tilted his head, as if he'd seen something. Izuku hesitated, just long enough to register the faint furrow in Katsuki's brow, the same one he used to make back in middle school whenever Izuku got hurt in P.E., and refused to sit out. Izuku's heart clenched, though he didn't know why. Then he fired a web to the nearest building and vanished into the night. His breath caught somewhere in his throat. He kept moving, gliding between buildings, sticking to shadows, breaking up a back alley deal near a karaoke bar, but the air felt wrong. Too heavy. He cut the patrol short. Back in his room, the city lights blinking outside his window, he sat at the edge of the bed and peeled the suit off piece by piece. The weight of the mask lingered long after he set it down. He barely slept. And when he did, he had a dream. It was raining. He stood at the edge of a cracked rooftop, younger, smaller, hunched in a hoodie far too big for him. His hands were shaking. His voice, worse. "Why do you always treat me like a kid? I can help." Uncle Toshinori stood tall, coat soaked, eyes hollow. "You don't understand what this is, Izuku. The second you put on a mask, you don't just get power. You get responsibility. You don't get to choose which parts you want. You think I don't know that? You don't." The words echoed, swallowed by thunder. The dream shifted, a flicker of chaos, sirens, and a sense of loss. Then Toshinori's body, limp in the alley, his chest unmoving. The scream ripped out of him before he could stop it. "I didn't mean to let you down." Time fractured. The rain stopped. Now they were in a cemetery, just the two of them. Izuku, kneeling at a fresh grave, dirt on his hands, the mask in his lap. His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "I'll keep them safe. Mom. The city. Everyone. I promise." Lightning flashed. Izuku jolted awake, lungs dragging in air like he was drowning. He sat up, drenched in sweat. His jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The dream clung to him like cobwebs, too vivid, too close. He rubbed at his eyes and sat in the silence of his dorm room. Still, dark, the only sound his own heartbeat. Izuku closed his eyes, letting his head rest back against the wall. It had been 2 months, but it still felt like yesterday. The city slowly came to life, bathed in the soft glow of morning. Thankfully, it was Saturday, no classes, no need to face his sharp-eyed, blonde classmate who watched him like a threat 1 second and handed him coffee the next. He just needed some air. Midoriya apartment, Azabu district, 9:38 a.m. The old building hadn't changed much. Same flickering hallway light, same slightly sticky elevator buttons. The scent of rice porridge and cleaning products wafted from behind neighboring doors. He didn't knock when he got to her unit, he still had a key. "Mom," he called, stepping inside. Inko Midoriya peeked out from the kitchen, wearing an apron and the look of someone who hadn't slept well either. "Izuku. Sweetheart. You didn't text. Are you okay? You look pale." He offered a tired smile. "Just needed to see you." She pulled him into a hug immediately. "Well, I was just making tamago." "Sit down. Tell me what's wrong." He hesitated because she didn't know not the truth about Spider-Man, not the guilt, not the rooftop. But she was all he had left, so he just sat at the table, letting her fuss over him and allowing himself to breathe. The scent of tamago still lingered in the air, warm and nostalgic, when the knock came. 3 sharp, deliberate raps echoed through the apartment. Izuku and Inko both turned their heads in unison, blinking in surprise. "Are you expecting someone?" Inko asked, her curiosity piqued. Izuku shook his head slowly. "No." Another knock, louder this time. Inko wiped her hands on her apron and padded to the door with a cheerful hum. "Maybe it's the neighbors." She opened it and froze. "Katsuki." Izuku's heart raced as he shook his head in disbelief. There stood Katsuki Bakugo, dressed in a black jacket over a gray hoodie, cargo pants, and heavy boots that seemed too much for a casual visit. Plastic bags hung from one arm, filled with convenience store bentos and a pack of soda cans. "Oh wow. Just great." Izuku's stomach flipped. Inko, however, lit up like a lantern. "Oh my god, it's been years. Look at you, you're so tall now. Come in, come in." Katsuki gave a sharp nod. "How are you, auntie?" Izuku stood halfway from his chair, his heart thudding in his chest. The last time Katsuki had been in this apartment, they were 9. He remembered the dirt tracked in by Katsuki's sneakers, the arguments over food, and the broken mug that had been his favorite. Katsuki stepped inside and met Izuku's eyes for a moment too long. "This isn't just a visit. He's here for something." "Didn't expect to see you here," Izuku said cautiously. Katsuki shrugged, setting the bags down on the counter. "Figured it's been a while. Thought I'd check in." "Liar. I didn't even know you two were talking again," Inko said brightly, unloading the food. "Izuku never tells me anything." Izuku forced a smile, but his chest felt tight. Katsuki leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, surveying the apartment like he was cataloging everything. Izuku let out a brittle laugh, nerves scraping raw. Katsuki leaned on the kitchen counter, his presence heavy in the air. His eyes flicked to a photo on the shelf, a smiling Izuku with Toshinori at the science fair in their 3rd year. The edge of Katsuki's mouth twitched. Inko was already setting out plates. "You boys still like curry, right? Just like old times." Izuku's hands were clammy. He had become good at lying, but Katsuki was even better at detecting it, especially when it came to Izuku Midoriya. 10 minutes later, in the living room, the food was gone. Somehow, Izuku had managed to eat, though every bite felt like static in his mouth. His stomach was flipping, and the room felt too small, too quiet. Katsuki sat across from him, observing him like a hawk. There was something clinical in the way he watched, as if he were dissecting every twitch of Izuku's face. "So, Auntie," Katsuki said casually, as if they were just making small talk. "What's your take on Tokyo's favorite wall-crawling hero?" Izuku blinked, caught off guard. Inko, blissfully unaware, had just sat down with her tea. "Well, I think he's trying his best. He saved that daycare just last week, didn't he?" "Cool," Katsuki replied dryly, chewing on a toothpick. "Still illegal. He's basically a walking lawsuit." Izuku's throat felt dry as he reached for his juice. "You sound personally offended," he muttered, trying to keep the mood light. "I am," Katsuki said flatly. "He's messy. Untrained. Thinks he's smarter than he is." It felt too familiar, too pointed. Izuku choked on a noodle. He attempted to salvage the moment with a joke. "You sound like you're describing me in physics class." Katsuki didn't miss a beat. "Exactly." Izuku forced a smirk, though his heartbeat felt like it was pounding in his ribs. "Nice to know I'm living rent-free in your head." Katsuki leaned forward, sharp as a knife. "Bet that hero is too." There it was, the bait. Izuku's mind raced for cover. He blinked once, then decided to play it bold. "I don't know," he said, feigning a grin. "I think he's kind of impressive." Katsuki choked on air. Inko blinked, surprised. "Impressive." Izuku's grin stretched wide, brittle with panic. "I mean, not impressive. Just like objectively agile. And symmetrical." Katsuki stared at him, bewildered. "You've lost your mind, Deku." Inko giggled, flustered, waving her hand in the air as if trying to clear the tension with tea fumes. "You boys haven't changed one bit." But Izuku had changed. So had Katsuki. "God, I want to disappear," Izuku mumbled, burying his face in his hands. Katsuki tilted his head, his eyes sharp. "Yeah, well. Some of us are good at disappearing." That line landed heavily. Izuku looked up, his expression frozen. For a moment. The warmth of their childhood home felt cold and calculating. It wasn't just a living room anymore, it was a chessboard, and Katsuki had just made a move. But Izuku wasn't going down without a play of his own. He forced a sharp laugh. "Yeah, right. Like how you disappeared for 3 years and suddenly showed up. What was that? A mission? Or just ghosting everyone you grew up with?" Katsuki's smirk twitched, not wider but meaner. "Didn't realize you were keeping tabs." Izuku shrugged, feeling the tension rise. "Hard not to when you stomp down the dorm hallway like a fridge with legs." Inko blinked, caught off guard. "Oh. Is that why you said you've been sleeping with headphones lately?" "Mom." Katsuki shrugged, mock innocent. "Don't blame me if you've got sensitive hearing." "I have sensitive hearing, thank you very much." "Yeah, that's not suspicious at all." Izuku nearly dropped his glass. "I what?" And then silence. The dangerous kind. The kind that coiled around the room like wire. Inko, mercifully, had drifted back into the kitchen, humming. But Katsuki hadn't moved, his eyes still measuring Izuku. Izuku took a breath, thin and sharp. "Still weird that you just vanished. No goodbye. No contact. Nothing." Katsuki leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "TCH. Like you'd have answered if I did." Izuku's voice went quiet. "You didn't even try." The pause that followed ached, filled with unspoken history and hurt. Katsuki was the one who looked away first. "This isn't a reunion, Deku." "I know," Izuku said softly. "And yet there were moments, little things. Like when Katsuki leaned over and handed Inko a folded napkin without a word when she spilled tea. Like how he quietly put his own dishes in the sink. Katsuki glanced at Izuku's still full glass and pushed the juice closer, silently reminding him to drink when he was anxious. It was a small gesture, a hint of softness hidden beneath his usual tough exterior. Izuku felt a familiar warmth, reminiscent of the boy who once bandaged his scraped knee with a grumble and a cartoon band-aid. The feeling confused him and brought a pang of hurt, as he realized he missed that connection, even while sitting across from Katsuki. That realization was the most dangerous part of all. Later that night, Midoriya apartment, 7:13 p.m. The front door clicked shut, a sound that echoed in the stillness of the living room. Izuku stood frozen, his gaze fixed on the couch cushion where Katsuki had just been sitting. Inko hummed softly as she rinsed the dishes, her actions reflecting a sense of normalcy. "He's grown up so much, hasn't he?" she said fondly. "Still a little grumbly, but I always thought you two would be okay again." "I knew it." Izuku hesitated before responding, forcing a smile. "Yeah, me too." Later Izuku's room, he sat on the edge of his childhood bed, which felt too small now, filled with memories. All Might posters adorned the walls, and dusty books lined the shelves. A pair of broken gloves lay tucked under his desk, remnants of a past life. It felt like a museum exhibit, untouched by time. He buried his face in his hands, wondering if Katsuki already knew how he felt. Katsuki's gaze had shifted. He no longer looked at Izuku like an old friend but rather as a challenge to confront. 11:47 p.m. Rooftops of Muzutafu. Izuku hadn't intended to suit up or slip through the window again, but the cold air felt familiar, and the skyline was steady. The mask felt like a second skin as he crouched under the stars, watching a city that seemed unsure whether to thank him or turn him in. A web shot into the air, hanging like an unfinished thought. For the first time in weeks, he wondered if, when it came down to it, Katsuki would chase him not to arrest him, but to bring him back home. Izuku stared at the horizon, reflecting on the sacrifices he had made for the city. "Kaken," he whispered, a plea escaping his lips. "If I lose myself, will you come for me? Will you still care? Will you still see me as worth saving?" Chapter 5, Beginning of the Fall. Tokyo, 12:48 a.m., Shiba Underpass. The night was eerily quiet as Spider-Man crouched above the Shiba Underpass, concealed among the steel beams. Below, 3 unmarked vans entered the tunnel silently, their movements too deliberate to be a typical gang deal. Izuku had followed an anonymous tip, expecting a black market tech exchange or a gang fight, but this felt different. The vans appeared military-grade, one bearing a faint logo from a defense company he had seen in a stolen file. Something was off. He started recording, just in case. Then chaos erupted. A powerful explosion rocked the lead van, flames shooting up to the ceiling. The shockwave knocked Izuku off his perch, and when the smoke cleared, he saw bodies on the road. One man in armor lay slumped against the wreck, motionless. Izuku's stomach churned. He hadn't done this. He hadn't even moved yet. Above, a drone hovered, silently recording. But the footage was manipulated, showing Spider-Man planting the bomb. It was fake deepfaked footage, perfectly timed to frame him. The data uploaded instantly. Izuku managed to grab a scorched data drive from the wreck before the sirens blared. He webbed away just as the police arrived, his heart racing. But it was too late. The gear in those vans. Old and worthless. The real goal was a trap, a public setup designed to make Spider-Man look like a threat. Tokyo, morning news broadcast, 6:12 a.m., police confirm last night's explosion at the Shiba Underpass involved stolen military-grade tech and left one security contractor dead. CCTV footage places the vigilante known as Spider-Man at the scene. Authorities are treating him as an armed suspect. The public is advised not to approach. This makes Spider-Man a suspect in multiple major crimes over the last 2 months. Tokyo Metro PD has officially classified him as a rogue threat. A citywide manhunt is now underway. Social media buzzed with activity. Some defended him, recalling the orphanage fire he had stopped and the kidnapped children he had saved. Others turned against him, fueled by fear and sensational headlines. He's not a hero. He's dangerous. Why wear a mask if you've got nothing to hide? Izuku watched from the shadows, his heart pounding. This was the beginning of his unraveling. 8:33 a.m., University, Room 402. Izuku's hands trembled under the desk as everyone discussed the news. Spider-Man was framed for serious crimes, and sitting 3 seats away was Katsuki Bakugo, dressed in his black Ground Zero security uniform, visibly tense. Nobody dared sit beside him, and Izuku couldn't look away, fearing Katsuki's reaction if he found out the truth. The last time they spoke was a week ago, and since then, Katsuki had been silent, but now his anger was palpable. Didn't Ground Zero secure the tech trucks? A girl whispered. Bakugo's team was supposed to SWCH shifts an hour later. Bad luck, I guess. Izuku glanced at his notebook, blank, his hands still stained with soot. 10:15 a.m. Engineering lab. Professor Yamada barely glanced at them. Midoriya, Bakugo Table 5. You're handling the circuit test. Izuku took the seat first, remaining silent. Katsuki stood for a moment before dropping into the seat across from him, his expression unreadable. He hadn't said a word all day, not since the broadcast. Now, he was staring at Izuku with an intensity that felt almost piercing. You weren't in class yesterday, Katsuki remarked. Izuku shrugged, keeping his focus on the tablet. I was sick. Katsuki didn't blink. Sick the same night that Spider-Man showed up 2 blocks from here. The stylus in Izuku's hand twitched. Maybe I should tell HQ, Katsuki said quietly, that he might be closer than we think. Izuku swallowed, his voice steadier than he felt. Why would you say that? Because I pay attention. Katsuki leaned in. And Spider-Man's gear. Homemade. He's not some government test subject. He's a kid with access to tech, physics knowledge, and way too many close calls in the Shinjuku area. Izuku managed a small smile, too quick, too forced. Well, sounds like you've got a crush on him. Katsuki scowled. I've got a job. And if I catch him, he's done. Izuku laughed dryly. So dramatic. But his heart was racing. Katsuki fell silent again, watching him, not just annoyed now, but suspicious. The atmosphere grew tense. You messed up the coil spacing, Izuku said quickly, turning the tablet toward him. Here. It was a distraction, and it worked. Katsuki leaned over to correct the values, still tense, but for now, he was silent again. Lunchtime, 12:23 p.m. Uraraka pushed the tray toward him. Eat, she urged. You look like a ghost. Izuku barely touched the rice. Why would they blame you? Ida whispered across the table. Were you near the convoy? I was following a tip. The smugglers were moving through the train tunnels, and I thought. He paused. It was a trap. They were waiting for me. Someone else took out the security. They just needed me on camera. Framing you, Uraraka breathed. Izuku nodded. And now Ground Zero is out for BLD, Midoriya, Ida said carefully, you can't patrol tonight. It's too dangerous. There's a bounty. The commission is watching. Bakugo is watching. I know, he replied. But in his mind, the gears were already turning. He couldn't sit still. Not when the real criminals were still out there using his name to cover their tracks. Later that night, dorms 1:14 a.m. The hallway lights flickered dimly. Izuku rounded the corner too fast, hand pressed tight to his side where the bruises from tonight's patrol bloomed under his ribs. His stealth suit clung beneath civilian layers, the hoodie stained, one glove shredded. His mask was crumpled in his back pocket like a secret he couldn't bury fast enough. Just a few more steps to his dorm room. Where do you keep disappearing to? He stopped dead. Katsuki stood against the wall by his dorm room, arms crossed, jaw set, eyes wild and burning. He looked like he hadn't moved in hours. Izuku froze, instinctively straightening. Library, he said, too fast and too flat. Katsuki stepped forward, the heat radiating off him like a threat. You think I'm stupid? Izuku didn't answer. His throat was dry. Every cell in his body screamed, run. You've been off since the Shiba underpass. Avoiding people. Flinching. You disappear at night like clockwork. I noticed. The words landed heavily. I'm just tired, Izuku offered. It's midterms. But Katsuki wasn't buying it. His eyes narrowed, voice low and dangerous. Cut the nonsense, Deku. You're hiding something. Izuku's muscles coiled. He stepped sideways, trying to get around him. Katsuki didn't move. Now, tell me the truth. What truth? He snapped, voice tight. Katsuki's growl was fierce. I'm not an idiot, and I'm not playing this game anymore. I don't owe you anything, Izuku muttered, jaw clenched. Something in Katsuki snapped. Tell me, he roared, grabbing Izuku's arm hard enough to leave a mark. Tell me you're the one walking through walls and stringing up gang runners like decorations. Izuku's breath caught. Tell me, Katsuki barked, before I turn you in myself. Because I swear, I'm not gonna stand here and watch you spiral into the same reckless person I knew before, no. Izuku ripped his arm free. Katsuki blinked. Why would I be Spider-Man? I'm just a good-for-nothing Deku, right? Silence fell like glass shattering. Flashback middle school, final year. The rain came down in sheets, drowning the gym courtyard in gray. Sirens wailed in the distance, rising over the chaos of the fire that had gutted an apartment block just a few streets away. Smoke still curled into the sky. Emergency lights flickered red against the pavement. And in the back lot behind the school, Katsuki Bakugo had Izuku Midoriya by the collar. What were you thinking? Katsuki shouted, voice hoarse from more than just yelling. Izuku's elbow was scraped raw, bleeding through the fabric of his uniform. His shoes were soaked, the soles caked with ash. I couldn't just watch her die, he snapped, eyes wide and wild, hair plastered to his forehead with rain. Katsuki shoved him back a step. Not hard. Just enough to rattle. Just enough to shake the air between them. You're not strong enough. Katsuki barked. You don't get it, Deku. Running into a collapsing building isn't heroism. It's reckless. I'd rather try than stand there doing nothing, Kaken, Izuku shot back, green eyes burning. It was a restricted zone, you moron. Katsuki's hands shook as he shoved him harder. You don't just decide to play hero. You follow orders. You wait for clearance. I didn't have time to wait. Izuku snapped back. She would have died, Kaken. Katsuki's face twisted, fury bubbling over. You could have died. And what then? You think your sacrifice would have made you some kind of saint? All you'd be is a headline. I had to try, Izuku said, voice trembling. Katsuki growled. That's what reckless people do. That's what gets others hurt. Izuku didn't answer right away, he just looked at him bruised, shaking. I think doing nothing makes you a coward. The word struck Katsuki like lightning. His fists clenched, soaked knuckles widening. His jaw trembled just slightly. So you think you're better than me? You think you're a hero? And no, Kaken, you'll never be anything but useless, Katsuki spat. A good-for-nothing Deku. And that was the last time they spoke, until this year. Izuku's voice shook now. You think I'd suddenly grow into someone like that? Someone with power? You really think I could be Spider-Man? Katsuki stared at him, unblinking. Then he stepped back. Just one step. The fury dimmed, swallowed whole by something colder. He turned and walked away without another word. His boots hit the floor like closing doors. Izuku didn't follow. He slipped into his room, locked the door with shaking hands, then slid down against it until he was sitting on the floor. His body ached, ribs burning under every breath. But it wasn't the pain that broke him. It was the truth. Ground Zero security still didn't have a face for Spider-Man yet. Just grainy footage. Leaked intel. A digital manhunt fed by fear. A masked figure. Unlicensed. Outlawed. And a liar. He'd spent 2 months hiding. Scrubbing evidence. Keeping Uraraka and Ida out of the direct line of fire. And even then it was slipping. The rooftop chase. The failed cover story. Katsuki staring through him like he already knew. Katsuki was circling. Not like a friend. Like a predator. Because he hated vigilantes. And Izuku knew that. But that wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was Katsuki himself. Because Izuku knew exactly why Katsuki hated vigilantes. His father died because of one. Some self-declared vigilante trying to play hero during a hostage crisis. He didn't wait for backup. Didn't follow protocol. Bursted in blind. A stray blast. 1 second too late. Katsuki's dad had been one of the hostages. He never made it out. Izuku remembered the day the news broke. The way Katsuki didn't speak for weeks. The fury in his eyes after the funeral. The burning, unbearable silence. After that, Katsuki didn't just dislike vigilantes. He dedicated his entire life to making sure nothing like that would ever happen again. Ground Zero security wasn't just a job. It was a vow. A weapon. A crusade built from grief. And Izuku was everything Katsuki despised. He wasn't registered. Wasn't sanctioned. He had no badge, no backup, no oversight. Just a mask, a modified suit, and some web fluid. A physics major pretending to play God in alleys Katsuki's team was trained to patrol. Izuku had always told himself he wasn't like the others. That he saved people. But deep down, he knew Katsuki wouldn't see the difference. Not if he found out. He'd see another reckless person in a mask. Just another vigilante. And when that day came, Izuku didn't know what would break first. His mask, his freedom, or the last piece of Katsuki still willing to believe in him. Katsuki sat in the back row, one boot tapping the floor, arms crossed, pretending to care about the group project everyone else was laughing through. Class felt the same as it always had. College students were just like those in middle school, clueless, loud, and obsessed with the wrong things. Annoying voices filled the room, flickering projectors cast shadows, and people pretended everything was fine while the city outside was in turmoil. His gaze was fixed on one person, Deku. Deku looked worn down, his hair unkempt, and his hoodie sleeves pulled over his wrists as if he were hiding something. A bruise had appeared under his jaw that hadn't been there the day before. The way he moved was unsettling, as if he were barely holding himself together. What is he doing to himself? Katsuki thought, though he knew it was none of his business. They hadn't spoken since the incident in the hallway when Izuku slipped away like a ghost. Katsuki felt a strong urge to grab him, to shake him, to scream until he broke. But he held back because, deep down, he already knew. And that knowledge without any proof was driving him mad. Deku had always taken calculated risks, stubbornly saving others even when it came at a high cost. This so-called vigilante didn't just fight, he protected. Actively and desperately. It felt painfully familiar. Katsuki recalled standing beside Deku in middle school, drenched in rain, while Deku ran into a burning apartment to help a child, or dashed into an alley to rescue a kitten stuck in a pipe. He remembered how Deku had nearly fainted during their first lab exam, refusing to leave until every broken sensor was fixed. Now, watching Deku unravel, bruise after bruise, lie after lie, and still pretending it didn't hurt, made Katsuki's heart ache. That dumbass always had a savior complex bigger than his spine. With a heavy sigh, Katsuki let his head hit the metal siding behind him and closed his eyes. The headlines were relentless. Spider-Man strikes again. Masked vigilante or trained criminal. Authorities issue citywide alert on unregistered hero activity. Every screen in the precinct displayed the same figure blurred, mid-air, green-lit eyes cutting through static. The mask. The suit. Illegally enhanced. No registry. No name. No face. The city turned paranoid. Every web sample tested. Every aerial drone recalibrated. The airspace above Tokyo buzzed with scanners and suspicion. Surveillance poured into black site hubs faster than it could be processed. And all the while, the real villain sat in silence. Watching. Smiling. Before Spider-Man became a headline before the protests, fear, and public outcry, the plan was already in motion. Kaijin, the hidden mastermind behind it all, wasn't after chaos or destruction. He wanted something more dangerous. Control. And the easiest way to control a city. Break its symbol. At first, Spider-Man was just a rumor, a shadow on security cameras, a story shared among kids on rooftops and alleyways. A ghost. But then, he saved people. Gave them hope. Became a symbol. So Kaijin changed his plan. Turn that symbol into a threat. Make people afraid of him. Get the city to blame him. And once the fear takes hold, give them a target. Turn Spider-Man into the enemy. Because nothing unites people faster than fear. Kaijin wasn't always like this. He used to be Dr. Shinsuke Kurigane, a brilliant scientist who created tech that could predict crimes and control human emotions, implants to rehabilitate criminals. But then he found out the truth. Governments were using his work to change people. Not help them rewrite them. Turn courtroom decisions into tech upgrades. Sell good behavior like a product. So he didn't destroy the system. He became something worse. He disappeared. Erased his name. Re-emerged as Kaijin. He didn't want to wipe out the world. He wanted to rewrite it. People aren't broken. They just feel too much. That's the virus. There will be no more grief. No memories. No guilt. No identity. Just silence. Order. Control. Spider-Man is the only thing left that won't go quiet. Kaijin hates him for that. Because this boy, this bleeding, reckless, stubborn kid keeps saving people. Keeps feeling, even when it hurts. He remembers. He mourns. He refuses to go numb. And Kaijin can't stand it. He plans to upload all of humanity into the neural web and press restart on the species. No more war. No more pain. No more questions. Just calm. Forever. Spider-Man is the last voice screaming in the dark, and Kaijin is ready to silence that voice. A clean world. A still world. People who obey without knowing why. No trauma. No rebellion. No resistance. Just blinking eyes, following orders. Boss. We've identified him. Kaijin turned slowly, bored. Say it again. The soldier grinned, holding up a tablet. The blurry footage focused. A boy in a hoodie. Limping. Carrying groceries. Bruised. Target acquired. Name, Izuku Midoriya. Age, 18. Status, university student. No license. No criminal record. No one special. A kid. Kaijin chuckled, low and cold. Exactly the kind of soul no one believes in. Until it's too late. Break the boy. Break the mask. On the monitors behind him, chaos. Fires. Explosions. Protesters clashing. The city unraveling, thread by thread. Downtown. Rooftop penthouse. 10:34 p.m. High above the sirens, Kaijin stood before a wall of monitors. His lieutenant stepped in, clearly amused at what he was seeing on the screens. They're eating each other alive. No one's even looking at us. Kaijin's reply was soft, that's the point. He reached into a sealed glass case, pulled out a vial. Red. Glowing. Neural override serum. Pure consciousness compression. Midoriya's under pressure. Cracks will form. One wrong step. One wrong confession. He'll expose everything. The screen behind him showed a glitching comparison, masked Spider-Man mid-swing. Then, Izuku Midoriya, unmasked, grainy, hoodie up. Let them chase the hero, Kaijin whispered. While I gut the web. He turned to the window. The city below didn't yet know it was already lost. Izuku sat in his dorm room, the only light coming from his laptop screen, casting a soft glow across the dark space. Outside, sirens echoed faintly, weaving through the Tokyo night like distant warnings. Up here, on the third floor, everything felt quiet, almost safe. He crouched by the window, resting his forehead against the glass. Across the street, the red and blue flashes of emergency lights reflected off buildings. Something was wrong. He could feel it deep in his chest, like a pressure he couldn't shake. It wasn't loud, but it was heavy, like the air just before a storm. His gaze dropped to the mask beside his bed, noting the cracked lens and burn marks near the webbing. It still worked, but the damage felt like a sign, like a part of him was breaking, too. How did it fall apart this fast? He tried to piece it together. It hadn't started with a big event, no huge battle or dramatic reveal, just small things, a police report filed too quickly, a news clip that didn't match what really happened, a strange tip sent seconds after he left a crime scene. Then the drones came. No logos, no sound, just silent watchers that always knew where to find him. They didn't chase him, they learned from him. And then, someone got hurt. Someone who shouldn't have. That's when everything started to spiral, and the headlines made sure of that. Civilian hospitalized after Spider-Man misfire, rogue vigilante attacks police drone. Was it even his? Who really protects our streets? Izuku hadn't misfired. That drone wasn't his. But no one cared, not the press, not the cops, not the security forces sweeping the alleys 3 blocks down. And not Ground Zero security. Especially not Katsuki. Izuku exhaled sharply, feeling his chest tighten. The last time he saw Katsuki, there was certainty in his eyes, like he already knew the truth. And that hurt more than any headline. He sank down on his bed, elbows on his knees, hands gripping his hair. His laptop buzzed with another article, another lie, another fake Spider-Man sighting. He ignored it and opened a hidden folder full of files he'd been collecting for weeks, crime reports, surveillance screenshots, data logs. Different crimes, different places, but the same strange pattern: too fast, too clean, too organized. On the surface, they looked unrelated, different weapons, different faces. But buried in the noise, there was one connection. In the corner of a corrupted bodycam frame, barely visible, a serpent coiled around a blank, faceless mask. Izuku leaned closer, heart pounding. This wasn't random. Someone was staging the crimes, framing him, using his name as a cover. And whatever they were planning, it was bigger than him. His phone buzzed. Uraraka texted, asking if he was okay, while Ida warned about protests forming near the station. He didn't reply. He couldn't drag them into this. If they knew the truth, they'd become targets too. He opened a blank note, fingers hovering over the keyboard, but no words came. Just silence and a mask lying beside him. Izuku stared at it and whispered, I'm running out of time. The night air burned. Smoke rose from Shinjuku's industrial zone, sirens wailed in the distance, searchlights cut across the sky, and drones buzzed overhead. Spider-Man was trapped. Izuku landed HRD on a rooftop, ribs throbbing, his suit torn and burned at the shoulder. He gasped for breath. Below, another false Spider-Man sighting triggered an explosion, and civilians screamed. That was the third fake sighting tonight. He shouldn't have stopped to help that kid in the tram, he should have kept running. But he never did. Now he was cornered. Every time he tried to help, it made things worse. And Katsuki was leading the chase. Izuku tapped his earpiece, but there was only static. His visor was glitching, the enemy was jamming his suit systems. He had 10 minutes left, maybe less. He shot a web, swung down between two cranes, and landed. Found you. Katsuki shouted as the rooftop exploded and he crashed down like a missile. Izuku rolled away, but not fast enough. Katsuki blasted again, smoke and debris swirling around him. He marched forward with deadly focus, wearing his ground zero gear eyes burning under the visor. You think this is a game? Katsuki shouted. People are dying because of you. You show up, and they burn. Izuku tried to dodge and block, he didn't want to fight, he just wanted to get away. But Katsuki wasn't holding back. He slammed Izuku with a punch to the gut, then a knee to the ribs. Blow after blow landed. You pretend you're helping. But you're not. Then came a blast point blank, right to the chest. Izuku flew back, crashing through a metal pipe, hitting the ground hard and coughing. He tried to get up when Katsuki pinned him down, gauntlet at his throat. Izuku couldn't speak, not because he was scared, but because he recognized that voice. It sounded like the old Katsuki, angry, wild, confused until something went wrong. Katsuki hesitated, his gauntlet shaking as the targeting glitched. Red light, then green, then blank. Katsuki paused, confused. What the hell? Izuku saw the opening, shot a web, pulled a steel pipe down, blocked the next blast, and jumped away. But Katsuki didn't follow right away. He looked at his helmet and tapped the side, but there was only static. Izuku knew what was happening, someone was cutting off the team, one by one, confusing them, using them. Katsuki spun back, tense. You're part of this, aren't you? Izuku said nothing. Why now? Why the glitches? Why when you're around? Katsuki's gauntlet flickered again, off then back on. He looked at it, not confused, suspicious. That made him reckless, and he lunged. They crashed through an old catwalk, falling into a warehouse below. Izuku hit the floor first, rolling into a crouch, but Katsuki was faster. He slammed Izuku down, one knee to his chest, gauntlet to his throat. End of the road. This time, Katsuki didn't stop. He grabbed Izuku's mask and ripped it halfway off. Izuku gasped, eyes wide, his mouth exposed, revealing part of his face and the scar under his lip. Katsuki froze, not just in his body but in something buried deeper. His heartbeat thundered, and his brain couldn't catch up. It was him. Izuku. No, Katsuki whispered, barely audible. His hand trembled, and his gauntlet hissed low, still powered up, but his grip loosened. The anger didn't leave, it fractured into disbelief, panic, and a silence so loud it drowned everything else out. Izuku moved first, boot to shoulder, a hard twist, and a web shot fired straight up, snapping his body to the beams above. By the time Katsuki lunged again, he was gone. Gone through the shattered skylight, into the smoke and night air. All that remained was the half-mask still glowing green along the edge, with a smudge across Katsuki's gloves. He stood there, breathless, then looked down at his gauntlet. The lights were blinking, not steady. The display flickered, glitched. A string of unfamiliar code scrolled across his visor. Unauthorized diagnostics. External access. Someone had hacked him. Someone wanted this to happen. He stared at the half-mask in his fist, at the marks on his gloves, at the crack in everything he thought he knew. It was 2:14 a.m. when Izuku finally made it back to his dorm. He crawled instead of walking, his body trembling, ribs aching, and blood soaking through his suit. His left eye was nearly swollen shut, and his shoulder hung limp. Every step felt like falling through water, the only thing keeping him upright was the wall and sheer will. He didn't even make it to the bed, dropping to his knees, palms leaving smears on the floor as his breath hitched. The pain wasn't new, but tonight it felt different, deeper. It wasn't just the bruises or the blood Kaken saw. That thought echoed louder than the sirens still howling outside. The silence that followed was suffocating. No alerts, no knocks, no pursuit, just the weight of it all, the violence, the betrayal, the recognition. Then came the loud banging at the door. Izuku. The door burst open without waiting for a response. Ochako was the first inside, wide-eyed and breathless, dressed in a hoodie and slippers. Ida followed closely behind, wearing his glasses and still blinking the sleep from his face. They froze when they saw him, blood everywhere. Half the mask still clung to his face, and his back arched in pain as he tried not to scream. God, Izuku. Ochako rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside him. What happened? Ida didn't speak. He moved with precision in panic, tearing open Izuku's first aid drawer, ripping open antiseptic packets, grabbing towels, water, and gloves. Izuku, look at me, Ochako said, holding his cheeks gently. You're here. You're safe. We've got you. Izuku didn't look up at first, trembling. His mouth opened as if he wanted to say something, but only a shudder escaped him, a gasp that barely made it past his lips. He knows, he whispered. Ochako blinked. Who? He shook his head, his voice cracking. Kaken. He knows. He tore the mask. He saw me. I barely got away. I couldn't. He almost, his whole body curled forward. He almost killed me. Ochako caught him before he collapsed again, cradling him like a child. Ida knelt beside them, eyes sharp behind his glasses but shining with concern. He gently pressed a towel to Izuku's temple. We need to clean this. You're losing blood. Izuku hissed at the contact but didn't stop him. I tried not to fight back, he whispered, his voice broken and hoarse. I didn't want to hurt him. I saw it. In his eyes. He didn't know it was me until the last second. Ochako gripped his hand tightly. Is he going to tell? Ida asked softly, not in judgment but as a necessary question. Izuku went still. I don't know, he said finally. But if he does, it's over. The GZS will take me apart. The words hung in the air, and then a new sound filled the room, a slow, rhythmic drip of blood hitting the floor. Ida stood and grabbed the med kit. We'll stop the bleeding. Ochako, get the spare clothes. And stay with him. I'll clean the hallway before anyone else sees. Ochako nodded, biting back tears. Outside, the sirens died down. Inside the room, only the sound of water running in a basin, the soft rustle of cloth, and the stifled winces of a boy too used to hiding his wounds filled the air. The three of them sat on the floor for hours. No one left. No one spoke unless they had to. And when morning came, Izuku's mask lay on the desk, cracked clean down the middle. Katsuki didn't sleep after that night. He sat at the surveillance hub of Ground Zero security, arms crossed, lips split, eyes fixed on the paused footage from the rooftop fight. Frame by frame, he rewound the encounter. Spider-Man had come out of nowhere, disrupting the smuggling operation GZS had been tracking for weeks. Katsuki hit the keyboard again, pausing the footage. There it was, that look when he had Spider-Man pinned. He remembered the way Spider-Man flinched, how his whole body had frozen, how he didn't fight back. Katsuki grabbed his coffee and slammed it down untouched, his head pounding and chest tight. "It's him," he muttered under his breath. He gripped the railing until his knuckles whitened. "Same look in your eyes even now," he said, frustration boiling inside him. He paced the interrogation room, every step echoing with rage. His lip was split, his fists raw, and the screen kept looping the footage like it was mocking him. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. Izuku was playing him, lying to him, dodging him like he was just another goon on patrol. "You little," Katsuki growled, pacing again. The worst part. He couldn't tell the agency. He slammed his fist into the wall, the crack echoing in the tiny room. Something didn't add up. Spider-Man had been tracking the same operations as GZS, but now everything was falling apart. Routes changed, evidence disappeared, and every time something went wrong Spider-Man was nearby, but not causing it. He was chasing someone else. Katsuki pulled up old surveillance footage from 2 nights ago. An unmarked truck had disappeared off the map, a truck that had GZS prototype weapons inside. Nobody saw who took it, but Katsuki remembered that night clearly Spider-Man wasn't attacking, he was pursuing. "Someone else is behind this," Katsuki muttered, glaring at the crime board filled with photos and maps. Black market names he'd been tracking for months led him to the edge of it all, the name Kaijin. A ghost in every file, a name with no face. Even Katsuki couldn't dig up intel. Now, squads were missing, smugglers had vanished, and communications were gone. Izuku kept showing up at the scene of the crime, not starting the fires, but trying to put them out. Maybe he was even being targeted. Katsuki narrowed his eyes, sensing something was off. "Someone's working under us," he thought as he examined the truck footage and checked the metadata. There was a ping, a signal from the truck's GPS, accessed from inside GZS by someone with high-level clearance. Katsuki felt a chill run through him. It was someone in his inner circle, a senior officer who had given him fake intel and delayed every Spider-Man report. "All this time," he whispered as the pieces clicked into place. Spider-Man Izuku wasn't the threat, he was being set up by someone inside. Kaijin. That name had surfaced repeatedly, always on the edges, untouchable and untraceable. But now Katsuki understood the game. Kaijin was using Spider-Man as a smokescreen, hijacking his missions, rewriting the narrative, and ensuring the city turned against him while GZS chased shadows. Katsuki stared at the paused image on the screen again. Izuku, bruised, cornered, and alone, was still fighting, still saving people, still lying to him. That was the Deku way, taking the blame, taking the pain, even if it killed him. Katsuki ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You stubborn idiot," he exclaimed, slamming both fists into the desk hard enough to rattle the whole room. A traitor in his unit, an invisible enemy named Kaijin puppeteering it all, and Deku carrying the whole mess on his back like it was his responsibility. He couldn't report him or trust his own agency to protect him, not when it was compromised from within. "God damn it," he muttered, turning to the crime board. He ripped down photos, threads, and files that no longer mattered, replacing them with a single focus: find the mole, expose Kaijin, and clear Deku. "You're tracking someone," he whispered, realizing Izuku was doing this alone. He slammed a hand onto the desk, the sting grounding him for just a moment. "And you didn't tell me." Katsuki sat back down, feeling heavy and seething. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, head bowed and heart pounding. Looking up at the monitor, he stared straight into the ghostly eyes of the paused figure of Spider-Man. Location: Kaijin's headquarters, underground bunker. The room was dim, flickering monitors casting ghostly light over cracked walls and cluttered schematics. Kaijin stood at the center, one hand pressed against the cold screen, watching a paused security feed, a blurry figure in red and black crawling across a rooftop. Spider-Man. Behind him, lieutenants murmured updates, charts, data points, none of it good. "He's catching on," one said, voice low. "He took down Squad 9, clean. No casualties, just disabled." He ripped the comm chip from unit leader's helmet and wiped the backup logs. He's been piecing together our routes, another added. He's close. Too close. Kaijin turned, eyes narrowed, and walked to the corkboard. Strings of red yarn stretched between photos and news clippings, villain attacks. Black market routes. Police corruption. And right in the center, a pinned photo of Izuku Midoriya, circled in red. Beside it 2 words scribbled in ink. Spider-Man. Kaijin pulled the pin from the board and held the photo in his fingers. He knows. He doesn't have the whole picture yet, but he knows. His voice was soft. Controlled. Too calm for what he was about to say. One of his lieutenants stiffened. Should we relocate? Kaijin shook his head. No. He'll keep digging. Keep trying to be a hero. And the closer he gets, the more dangerous he becomes. He let the photo fall to the floor, then stepped on it, heel grinding into the boy's face. Heroes don't break when you punch them. They break when you take away what they're fighting for. The others went silent. Kaijin turned to the wall beside him. 2 photos were taped there, printed just yesterday. One, Katsuki Bakugo, in uniform, scowling in front of Ground Zero security headquarters. The other, Inko Midoriya, standing outside her apartment building with groceries in hand. Smiling. Ordinary. Vulnerable. Kaijin stared at the second one. Well, he's still a child, he said quietly. Wearing a mask, pretending he can save a city. Let's see how strong he is without his anchor. The room went cold. Someone swallowed audibly. Sir, you mean? Kaijin nodded, slow and deliberate. Make it public, and leave a message. He turned to the others, face lit by the pale blue of the screens. By the time I'm done with him, Spider-Man won't be a hero. He'll either beg for mercy, or become one of us. Chapter 9, Checkmate. 10:45 p.m. Industrial District. Uraraka's warning echoed in his mind. They've doubled patrols. They'll grab you if you step out. Ida added, firm and worried, this isn't just reckless, Midoriya. It's dangerous for all of us. But something in him snapped. He needed to know. To act. Because villains didn't wait for permission, and neither could he. He was running out of time. He suited up in silence, fingers working on muscle memory. Each motion was familiar: zip, fit, seal. Below him, the city sprawled open like a wound. Cold. Buzzing. Waiting. And then a scream. A single, sharp note. Human. Helpless. He was already running. Adrenaline roared through him, blood pounding behind his eyes. Every nerve sparked. Every instinct screamed go. And he found her, a young mother, trapped under a steel beam in the shell of a warehouse, swallowed by flames. There wasn't time to think. Only time to move. He fired webs, anchored them fast, wrapped his arms around the searing metal and pulled. Every inch felt like tearing his body apart, but he dragged her out. She coughed, barely conscious. He didn't stop. He never stopped. And that's when he looked up. Smoke. Thick, black smoke rose quickly from the direction of home. In East Shizuoka, Kaijin's voice crackled through a private comm channel, distorted and inhuman. Target identified. Proceed. 3 masked figures burst into the Midoriya apartment, swift, silent, and trained. One poured gasoline while another struck a flare. The explosion was not chaotic, it was surgical, planned to the second. By the time the fire spread, the blame was already being planted. Spider-Man would be held responsible before sunrise. Izuku was still with the woman, his eyes stinging from the smoke, his suit drenched in sweat. He handed her off to paramedics. Then he heard the sirens shift direction, and everything collapsed around him. He ran, jumping across rooftops faster than he ever had, faster than he could think. Please, not my mom. The lights blurred, and the city smeared past him. The only sound he could hear was his own pulse pounding in his ears. And then ash. Just ash. The apartment was gone, reduced to charred brick and broken beams. He stumbled through the wreckage, the heat still clinging to the air. Fire engine lights flashed behind the smoke like the afterimage of lightning. He stepped over warped picture frames and his old mug, cracked in two. The couch and the scorched floor were all that remained, along with the shape of something beneath the debris. And then he saw her. Mom, her body was half buried, blood at her temple, soot streaked across her cheeks. She lay still, so still. He dropped to his knees, his breath shaking as he reached up and tore off his mask. His hands trembled as he cradled her face, dirt smudging across his cheeks. Her eyelids fluttered. I'm here. I'm right here, he said, his voice breaking. Her eyes opened and flickered. Izuku, he struggled to breathe, holding her head gently. I'm here. I'm here, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, I'm sorry, forgive me, I came late. He was shaking, sobbing, pouring out every apology he'd never said. Barely holding it together, he shut his eyes tight. I'm Spider-Man, the words felt heavy. I'm sorry I didn't tell you because I thought I was protecting you. I thought if I kept it a secret, you'd be safe. But I was wrong. I was so wrong, I'm sorry, Mom. Her eyes remained unchanged, as if she had known all along and loved him anyway. Zuku. I always knew, she whispered. I was always proud of you, my brave boy. He broke down, sobs escaping him like lightning splitting a tree. No, please don't go, I can save you, I have to save you. Izuku's voice cracked, filled with panic, his hands trying to hold her together as if he could will her heart to keep beating. But she smiled, soft, aching, full of love. Her voice was barely a whisper. You already have. So many times. So many people. Her fingers brushed his cheek, trembling. Don't stop, Izuku. Don't ever stop saving them. A shallow breath. Then another. Her eyes blinked slower now. You've always had it in you, your Uncle Toshi knew it too, she whispered, her voice thin but certain. I love you, Zuku. My boy, she exhaled one final time, her lips curling. Now, let someone save you. With that, her hand slipped away gentle and final, leaving Izuku holding the silence where her warmth used to be. Real silence, the kind that crushes the air from your lungs. He didn't scream or move. He just sat there, cradling the woman who had given him everything and whom he couldn't save. He didn't remember walking to the rooftop, the climb, or the pain in his ribs. All he remembered was kneeling there, mask torn, blood on his knuckles, ash in his lungs, and feeling nothing, as if he had died with her, leaving only an echo behind. Uraraka had never run so fast in her life. Ida shouted behind her, struggling to catch up, but she didn't stop, not when she saw the smoke on the horizon, not when she heard the news, not when her heart told her where he'd be. The apartment, his mom, no answer on his phone, they knew something had happened. They hit the final stairwell hard, the door to the rooftop nearly ripped off its hinges. And there he was. Izuku. Collapsed on the concrete, his back to them, body shaking, fingers clawing into his arms as if he were trying to tear himself open. His mask lay in shreds beside him. His suit was scorched, cracked down the spine like it had been through hell. Izuku. Uraraka whispered, dropping to her knees beside him, arms reaching out without thinking. The second she touched him, he shattered. A howl broke from his throat, violent and primal, tears burning paths down his ash-streaked face as he clutched at her jacket. For a moment, Uraraka just held him, because that was all she could do. She's gone, they killed her, Izuku gasped, his fists slamming the ground, blood smearing across the concrete. He was shaking uncontrollably. They made it look like I did it, why her? Uraraka tried to hold him tighter, whispering, we're here, it's not your fault, Izuku, but her voice was drowned out by his rage. I should have known, he screamed, wrenching free. I should have been there. I was saving someone else. I let them trick me. He turned on them suddenly, eyes wild with grief. What's the point of saving anyone if I can't even protect her? Ida flinched. Uraraka tried again, softly, carefully only for Izuku to shove her away. Don't touch me. Ochiko fell back, breath knocked out of her. Midoriya, this isn't. Ida instinctively moved between them, arms out, voice stern but shaken. But Izuku wasn't listening. His breath hitched, his eyes glassy and wild. His voice came out low, unrecognizable. I'll find them. Ida blinked. Midoriya. Whoever did this. Whoever planned this. His fists trembled. I'm going to find them. I don't care who they are, I don't care what it takes. Each word cracked like thunder through the heavy rooftop silence. Uraraka slowly sat up, still-winded, staring at him like she didn't recognize the boy standing in front of them. Izuku's hands were balled into trembling fists, his body shaking under the weight of fury too big for his frame. They didn't just take her, he hissed. They humiliated her. They used her. They made her die thinking his voice broke. He pressed his fists against his eyes, as if he could hold the tears back. They think I'll stop now. That I'll run. That I'll turn myself in. I won't. He looked up at Ida, at Uraraka, at no one and everyone. I'm going to find and confront them. That's when the door slammed open behind them. The metal groaned under forceful boots, and every head turned. Katsuki. Chapter 10, Nowhere left to hide. Katsuki's phone buzzed, a vibration sharp and hollow in the quiet of the agency's command room. He ignored the first one, focused on reviewing field data, until the second ping came in, high priority alert. He glanced down. Civilian fatality. Apartment complex fire. Suspected vigilante involvement. Victim, Inko Midoriya. The world tilted. Everything else blurred. The report stayed in focus like it was carved into stone, cold and merciless. Inko Midoriya. The name echoed in his mind. He couldn't believe it. The Midoriya woman. The small one with the gentle voice who used to offer him snacks when he came over as a kid. The one who always asked how school was, even when he barked back a tch and rolled his eyes. Gone. Burned alive. Framed just like the others. Framed like every other poor soul Spider-Man tried to save. But this time, it was different. This time, it was personal. Katsuki already connected the dots. Confirmed. And he knew exactly where to find him. The rooftop door creaked open beneath his hand, the metal groaning as if reluctant to reveal what awaited beyond. Smoke lingered in the air, faint and ghostly, while the city buzzed softly below. But up here, it was too quiet. Standing at the edge of the rooftop, Katsuki noticed his suit was scorched, barely clinging to him in tattered pieces. BLD coated his fingers, and his mask, his entire identity lay in ruins on the ground beside him. He felt like a shadow of his former self. He wasn't alone. Two others stood frozen beside him, Uraraka, with her pink cheeks and round eyes, and Ida, the serious one with glasses. They were familiar faces, people Katsuki had seen trailing behind Deku. They knew the truth, and of course, they did. But none of that mattered now. Izuku looked utterly wrecked, not just tired or injured, but empty. His eyes were bloodshot, lips trembling, shoulders curled in as if he were trying to fold into himself. Katsuki felt something lurch in his chest. He was familiar with rage, betrayal, and deep fury, but this was different. This was, so, he said, his voice a slow grind of gravel, you are Spider-Man. There was no challenge in his tone, just a statement of fact. Izuku didn't argue, plead, or lie, he simply looked at him. Then, he collapsed to his knees on the concrete, as if Katsuki's words had confirmed an unbearable truth he couldn't hide anymore. There was no denial, no fight, just surrender. Izuku bowed his head, arms hugging his chest, shoulders twitching from silent sobs he could no longer contain. He was a boy who had carried too much for too long. Katsuki should have felt anger, should have demanded answers for the lies, for the secrecy, for allowing the world to see Spider-Man as a menace while he played the role of a student by day. But he couldn't. Because he truly saw Izuku then. Standing there, watching the trembling boy look up at him with grief-soaked eyes, Katsuki's heart sank. The grief, the guilt, the horror of realizing that the person who loved him unconditionally was suffering, it all hit him hard. Without remembering how he moved, Katsuki found himself on his knees. Before he could think twice, he pulled Izuku into a hug. It wasn't explosive or angry, it was tight, firm, and real. Izuku froze for a moment, then fell into Katsuki like a crumbling building, as if the only thing holding him up was finally strong enough to catch him. The noise that escaped Izuku's throat was heart-wrenching, a deep, raw sob that seemed to come from a place so profound that it could tear the rooftop apart. He clung to Katsuki like a lifeline, as if touch was the only thing anchoring him to the present. "Kaken, I didn't know they tricked me," he stammered, his words fragmented and drenched in grief. Katsuki pressed his hand to the back of Izuku's head, his other arm wrapped around his waist, anchoring him with every ounce of strength he had. "I know," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "I'm sorry." Uraraka was crying silently now, hands covering her mouth, while Ida stood behind her, pale and trembling. None of them spoke. Katsuki just held Izuku through the shaking, through the choking sobs, through the blood and soot, and all the things they had never said. In that moment, he felt that this was the only thing keeping Izuku Midoriya from vanishing completely. And for reasons he didn't fully understand yet, he was determined not to let that happen. He was done letting Izuku face it alone. The funeral was small, far too small for someone like Inko Midoriya, who deserved so much more. Her kindness had touched lives quietly and gently, like sunlight warming unnoticed windows. She deserved a crowd, memories shared among friends, laughter through tears, and music that celebrated her life. But none of that could happen, not with the shadows looming over Izuku's connections. So it was just a handful of people gathered, a sacred pocket of those who knew the truth and were willing to be there anyway. Uraraka stood to the side, her face mostly hidden behind dark glasses, but the puffiness of her cheeks and the trembling of her fingers revealed her sorrow. She held a single white lily and whispered a goodbye she couldn't say out loud. Ida kept his head bowed throughout the service, his glasses fogging with each breath, his shoulders trembling with the wind. Mitsuki Bakugo stood tall beside her son Katsuki, a rare stillness anchoring her usual storm. She gripped Katsuki tightly, glancing at Izuku with quiet heartbreak in her eyes. Katsuki didn't look at anyone else, his gaze remained fixed on Izuku. Not once did he look away, even when the casket was lowered and others stepped back to give space. He stayed right there, a silent shadow beside Izuku, as if daring anyone or anything to take another piece of him away. Izuku didn't ask why Katsuki stayed, he didn't have the energy. The weight of grief settled heavily in his lungs, and he felt like driftwood, adrift and empty. He knelt slowly before the grave, fingers brushing the cold edge of the marble, leaning in to press his forehead against it as if it were the only anchor left. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I'm sorry, Mom. I love you, and thank you." He didn't cry, there was nothing left inside to spill. Later, in the dormitory, the atmosphere was thick with silence. Everyone had gathered in Izuku's room not because they had answers, but because they didn't know what else to do. Grief clung to them like humidity, heavy and unspoken. Katsuki sat on the floor, back against the wall, legs outstretched but tense. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, his eyes scanning the room, calculating. He was planning. Ida sat rigidly at the foot of the bed, hands curled into fists, his stillness born from sheer willpower. Uraraka perched at the edge of the mattress, twisting the fabric of her shirt with anxious fingers. Izuku curled in the corner, knees drawn up, eyes hollow. His hoodie hung off one shoulder, sleeves swallowing his hands. He hadn't spoken since they returned, barely blinking, just fading away. The photo of his mother on the desk remained untouched, her smile bright and loving, a reminder of hope and better days that would never come. The silence dragged on until Katsuki's voice sliced through it. "They're going down." His tone was sharp, cold, and sure. Everyone turned to him, surprised. Katsuki's jaw was tight, his voice low but trembling, not from fear, but from anger. "I don't care how many of them there are. We're going to find them." He locked eyes with Izuku. "And we're going to burn them to the ground." The room fell still. Izuku stared back, not blinking, not breathing. Something flickered in his empty eyes, a spark of anger, quiet but alive. A low heat began to bloom in the ashes of his grief. "They wanted to break you," Katsuki continued, voice low and fierce. "But you're still here. And they didn't win." Uraraka swallowed hard. "We'll help," she said, her voice soft but steady. "We're with you, Izuku. Every step." Ida straightened. "The Kaijin think they can erase people in the shadows. Let's bring it all into the light." Izuku looked down at his hands, scared yet capable. He exhaled slowly and stood, his steps heavy but purposeful. He moved to the drawer at his desk, pulled it open, and there, folded at the bottom, was the half-burnt and torn remains of his Spider-Man mask, the symbol of his fight, his mistakes, and his hope. He didn't put it on, he just stared at it in silence. And just like that, Spider-Man rose from the grave. Izuku needed a new place, somewhere no one would think to look, somewhere the Kaijin couldn't reach, somewhere the ghosts couldn't follow him. So Katsuki made an offer. No words, just a keycard tossed on the table in front of him. Izuku understood. Katsuki's lab wasn't listed anywhere, no digital footprint, hidden 5 floors beneath a repurposed training facility downtown, disguised as a closed-down combat gym. Entry required biometric scans and encrypted codes that changed every 6 hours. Katsuki built it with money from contracts. No one dared to question jobs that came with blank checks and encrypted files. The walls were lined with alloy plating and blackout shielding, resistant to detection. Every entrance was rigged with failsafes, and there were rooms with lead-laced walls and dead zones where even light bent the wrong way. It was a fortress, a secret, and now it was theirs. They met there, the 4 of them, Izuku, Katsuki, Uraraka, and Ida. The lab was colder than anyone liked to admit, with buzzing lights and holographic displays scrolling police data, intercepted Kaijin transmissions, and AI-enhanced recon maps. The table in the center was a war zone of open case files, shattered tech, and scribbled timelines, a testament to their determination to fight back. In the far corner, mounted with quiet reverence, was a glass box containing a half-burnt Spider-Man mask. Beside it sat Inko's kitchen clock, which Izuku sometimes stared at, though never for long and never in front of others. He hadn't cried since the funeral, not once. Instead, he focused on moving forward. He trained, read, and strategized. Every night, after hours of meetings and evidence reviews, he suited up again. This time, it was a new suit, made of reinforced nanoweave and adaptive mesh, rebuilt and modified. The city was aware that Spider-Man was no longer hiding. The Kaijin were becoming more aggressive, less careful, and more coordinated. The messages they left behind were direct, tagging his name with phrases like, "Spider-Man lied," "Spider-Man burns," and "Spider-Man dies next." Every alley, every wall, and every scene he left for the police connected back to the same name whispered in the dark, Kaijin. The bounty on his head had exceeded 500,000 yen, and the media had labeled him a traitor, a killer, an urban menace turned mass murderer. The public, once enamored with the symbol swinging through the skyline, had turned against him. Later that night, Izuku sat alone near the corner bench, one hand curled around a chipped mug of green tea. The warmth seeped into his fingers, grounding him. Katsuki walked past, paused, and dropped something beside the mug, a protein bar. "Eat something, nerd," he muttered, not even waiting for thanks. Izuku looked up, and their eyes met in the low light. This time, instead of looking away, he asked softly, "Stay for a bit." Katsuki hesitated. Then, after a breath, he slid onto the floor beside him, back against the bench, close but not touching just enough. "I'll stay." The words fell between them, quiet and steady. For a while, neither spoke. The hum of machinery filled the silence, soft and constant. Izuku sipped his tea while Katsuki leaned his head back against the bench, arms folded, jaw clenched as if holding something unspeakable. Then, low and almost offhand, Katsuki's voice broke the silence. "You know I don't believe in half the things you do." Izuku turned his head but didn't speak. Katsuki exhaled sharply through his nose. "But even I know something worth saving when I see it." Their eyes met again and stayed there. Katsuki didn't look away or flinch. He didn't say the words, but Izuku felt them. Beneath all the harsh edges, the armor, and the anger, there was care steady and real. "Kaken," Izuku murmured, his voice thick. The name carried more than memory now, it carried comfort, safety, and something warm he'd almost forgotten how to feel. Katsuki didn't reply, but he leaned back slightly, letting his shoulder brush against Izuku's, and didn't move away. To Izuku, that was more than enough. Katsuki had been sifting through Ground Zero Security's internal intel for 2 weeks. He didn't sleep much anymore, cycling between the agency and the lab, poring over reports with tired eyes and a scowl on his face. The deeper he dug, the worse it got. Nothing matched. Crime reports weren't just late, they were wrong. Patrol routes were being leaked before boots even hit the ground. Every time his team moved, a Kaijin ambush followed like clockwork. Emergency calls were rerouted, support requests got lost in the system, and 2 field agents disappeared for 12 hours with no explanation. When they returned, they had no memory of what happened. He knew what this was. Someone was feeding Kaijin their locations. Not just some civilian tip-off, this was clean and precise. Someone on the inside, someone with clearance, was using his own agency to hurt people and to pin it all on Spider-Man, making him the monster. Katsuki would do whatever it took to find them. The irony wasn't lost on him, his entire job was built around rooting out vigilantes, dragging them into the light, cleaning up the streets. But now, he was sitting in an underground war room, planning counterstrikes with the very one he was supposed to arrest. Now, he was helping Spider-Man. Now, he was protecting him. He hated what it said about him. Every moral line he used to draw so cleanly had blurred the moment Izuku looked at him, grief-stricken, bleeding, broken, and still fighting. Katsuki still didn't believe in vigilantes, he thought they were dangerous and reckless. But something was wrong at Ground Zero Security. He was methodical. Every hour he wasn't in the field, he pored over files, encrypted call logs, patrol schedules, security footage, internal memos with timestamps that were just wrong. He installed covert monitoring systems in the agency's servers and started pulling private access logs no one knew existed. When that wasn't enough, he sent fake patrol routes into the system just to see where Kaijin would strike. They took the bait 3 times in a row. The leak wasn't random, it was targeted and deliberate. Someone was sabotaging his team from the inside. Someone wanted Izuku gone. Every time he saw Izuku in that suit, his fury turned cold. Izuku didn't flinch anymore. He didn't complain when he stumbled into the lab at 2 a.m., arm bruised, blood soaking through his gloves. He would nod once, barely meet Katsuki's eyes, and slump into a chair without a word. His back curled forward, and his hands trembled when he thought no one was looking. The bags under his eyes were so dark they looked painted on. When Katsuki saw the way Izuku's jaw stayed clenched like the pain was a secret he refused to share, it made something in him snap. It was about the way no one had listened, how Kaijin used their grief like leverage, and how someone had weaponized his agency against the one person still trying to save others, even after losing everything. Katsuki wanted to end this. Not just for the city, but for him. Base Night. 10:20 p.m. The overhead lights buzzed low above them, casting pale shadows across the worn concrete walls. Screens flickered with real-time surveillance, maps of Tokyo's industrial sectors, police drone flybys, and red dots that marked suspected kaijin movements. It felt less like a planning room and more like a war bunker. Because that's what it was now. A war. Ida stood by the main monitor, suit jacket wrinkled from too many nights spent sitting up. He tapped a glowing pin near the Tokyo Bay. According to the last tracking ping, kaijin operatives were spotted near a food distribution center close to Takoba Wharf, he said, his voice calm but clipped. Too organized for a random hit. They're gathering, Uraraka murmured, cross-legged on a rolling chair beside him, her eyes scanning time-stamped civilian footage. It's too frequent now. Same perimeter patterns. Same fallback zones. They're planning something. They're testing something, Katsuki added, leaning forward against the edge of the table, arms braced as if he might snap the wood in two. Picking places with limited exits. Practicing lockdown scenarios. His voice was low and analytical, but his knuckles were white. Izuku remained silent, crouched low near the far workbench, the quiet buzz of solder against steel the only sound he made. Izuku. Uraraka said softly, not unkindly. He didn't flinch or look up. He honestly didn't want to do this. Not with them. Uraraka's eyes were too gentle, too full of concern. Ida spoke with a calm strength Izuku didn't feel worthy of anymore. And Katsuki watched him like he was trying to solve a puzzle that refused to come together. They had been working as a team now. Uraraka kept gaining access to private satellite footage through her old internship contacts. Ida cracked into dormant commission archives, retrieving files the public believed were destroyed. Katsuki provided them with the lab, the intel, the fire. They were smart, fast, and brutal when they needed to be. But every time they circled the table debating their next moves, Izuku's chest tightened. The longer this lasted, the more involved they got, the higher the chances they'd end up hurt. Like her. His mother. So he started pulling away again, skipping briefing nights and ignoring communications. It wasn't trust that made him run, it was fear. A sick, clawing fear that if he let himself care about them, really care, they'd be taken too. Like everyone else he'd failed to protect. Midoriya. He blinked. Ida was beside him now, not close enough to crowd him, but close enough to mean something. He placed a warm drink on the bench, green tea, just the way Izuku's mom used to make it. You don't have to speak, Ida said quietly, but we're not going anywhere. Izuku stared at the cup, at his hands, at them. They weren't asking him to be okay. They weren't pretending he wasn't falling apart. They were just there. Suddenly, a memory hit him unbidden, bright, cruel. His mother's fingers cradling his cheeks. Her smile trembling but proud. Her voice, a whisper in the dark, now let someone save you. Something cracked in his chest. A soft, breaking thing. His breath stuttered. His fingers curled around the schematic like it could anchor him to the present. Then, quietly, hesitantly, he stood. He walked forward, dropped the new web schematic on the center of the table, and spoke. We'll hit the Takoba location at 0300, he said. Silent entry. 0 casualties. No media. If there's even a hint of kaijin movement, we take one alive. His voice didn't shake. His posture didn't waver. It was the tone of someone who had nothing left to lose but refused to lose anyone else. A quiet nod from Ida. Uraraka's shoulders slumped in relief. And the subtle way Katsuki's lip twitched, not quite a smile, but a promise. They were with him. Not because he was Spider-Man. Not because he was some walking tragedy. But because he was Izuku and he wasn't alone anymore. He still woke up gasping. Still saw her when he closed his eyes. Still felt like the weight of the past would never lift. But now, when the burden threatened to crush him, when the guilt threatened to drown him, he remembered the sound of her voice and the warmth of 3 people who refused to let him go. Chapter 12, Closer Than We've Ever Been. The lab was quiet. Safe. But Izuku still couldn't sleep. So he stood up, pushed past the silence and the weight in his chest, slipped on a hoodie, and walked out the back corridor. His feet knew where to go before his mind did. There was always one place he returned to when everything inside him was screaming. The rooftop. When he reached the door and nudged it open, a soft gust of cold air swept against his cheeks. And there he was. Katsuki, leaning on the railing, arms crossed, hoodie up, breath curling in front of him like smoke. He didn't move or look back, just stared at the skyline like it was trying to tell him something. Izuku opened the door slowly, his voice quiet and hesitant. Kaken. What are you doing here? Katsuki didn't turn. Can't sleep. Izuku swallowed, his eyes dropping to the cracked cement. This is my spot, you know. Oh, shut up. A faint scoff, not sharp or cruel, just tired. They stood in silence, the wind rustling their sleeves. 2 silhouettes above a city that never truly slept. After a moment, Izuku asked, "Can I?" Katsuki nodded once. Yeah. Izuku stepped forward, shoulder to shoulder now, not touching, but near enough to feel the warmth of someone who stayed. He looked over and froze. Katsuki's face was calm, turned in profile against the moonlight, red eyes darker than usual, shadowed with something unreadable. And maybe it was the silence, maybe the hour, or maybe it was the way Katsuki's lashes caught the light, the pink of his lips chapped from the cold, the line of his jaw more defined than it had any right to be. But for the first time, Izuku noticed. Really noticed. And it made his chest tighten. When did he become so appealing to me? Izuku blinked fast, heat rising to his cheeks. Katsuki frowned. What? And nothing. There was a beat. Then Izuku whispered, "Kaken, are you mad at me?" The words barely came out. Katsuki was quiet for a long time. Then finally, he spoke. I was. Izuku looked down at his hands. I'm sorry for lying. For not telling you. He stopped, voice faltering, I didn't know how to explain it. How broken I felt. How much I was afraid you'd hate me. This was the first time they had really spoken since everything changed. Katsuki's jaw clenched. His voice dropped, raw and honest. I did hate you. Izuku flinched. You really thought that was smart? Running around like a ghost, thinking no one would notice. Izuku opened his mouth, but Katsuki cut him off with a glance. Of course you did. Because that's what you do, right? Katsuki scoffed. Take the hit. Carry the weight. Let everyone think you're fine while you fall apart where no one can see. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping him. Always playing savior. Like it's some kind of curse you have to drag around. Like you're the only one who gets to break. Izuku stayed silent, feeling the tension in the air. For a moment, Katsuki looked like he might explode again, like the fire inside him needed an outlet. I hated it, he said, quieter now. Not just the lying. Not the mask. I hated that you keep doing this. Izuku blinked, his heart racing. You always throw yourself into fire like you're the only one who can burn, Katsuki muttered. Like it's your job to bleed for everybody else. The word struck deep, too familiar. Katsuki's tone had shifted from anger to something colder, sharper, like a raw truth. I hated watching it happen again, he added, glancing at Izuku for just a second. Izuku couldn't find his voice. Katsuki let out a slow breath, almost as if it pained him to say what came next. I hated it because I knew that was just you. That big heart you wear like armor. I hated that you were still the same. Even now. He wasn't yelling anymore. Izuku swallowed, his voice thin but steady. I didn't think anyone would understand. Katsuki finally looked at him fully, his expression tired but not cruel. I didn't. Not at first. Izuku stared at him, feeling something shift within. The way Katsuki carried his feelings hot, bitter, heavy was his way of saying he cared. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The shouting, the harsh words, the silence. Izuku looked down at his bandaged hands, then back at Katsuki, whose eyes were softer now. Katsuki noticed the way Izuku's shoulders trembled, the way his fists curled into the fabric of his hoodie. Tears threatened to fall, but he held them back. "Tch, nerd," Katsuki muttered. "Don't tell me you're gonna cry." Izuku sniffed, a small laugh escaping him. "And no. I'm not crying. I'm emotionally leaking." Katsuki let out a sharp exhale, almost a laugh, but he wouldn't call it that. "Dumbass," still dramatic as ever. Izuku wiped his face with his sleeve and looked at him. "Kaken, I haven't thanked you yet." Katsuki frowned. "Thank you. For not turning me in. For saving me." Katsuki's voice dropped. The real problem's the suits sitting in clean offices while people suffer. They made this mess. There was a pause. "And when I saw you after the fire," he continued, his words heavy, "you looked like a ghost, Deku." Izuku's breath caught, but he didn't look away this time. "I'm still sorry," he whispered. Katsuki nodded slowly. "Me too." Izuku blinked at him, surprised. "I realized," Katsuki continued, "this wasn't some heroic stunt. This was something you've been carrying every single day." Izuku's eyes burned, but he kept them open. Katsuki turned to him, his gaze soft in a way it hadn't been since they were kids. He gave a dry laugh, lacking humor. "Maybe this Spider-Man thing wasn't a fluke," he muttered. "Maybe you were always meant to be this. A vigilante. A hero. Whatever you call it." Izuku's face flushed, and he quickly turned to look at the skyline, blinking hard. "I didn't ask for it," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't want to lose my mom, I know. I was just trying to help people." "And you did," Katsuki replied. "You still can." Then, quieter, but not alone. There was another pause. "Also, part of me already knew." Katsuki smirked. Izuku blinked in confusion. "What?" Katsuki shot him a flat look. "What? You think I wouldn't notice Spider-Man limping the same way you did after falling off that balcony back in middle school?" Izuku flushed. That could be anyone, oh please," Katsuki scoffed, rolling his eyes. "I'm not stupid, Deku. I watched every Spider-Man clip I could find. Patrol cam footage, random civilian videos, news streams, hell, even grainy TikToks." Izuku blinked, mouth slightly open. "Wait, you watched that many Spider-Man videos?" "Don't make it weird," Katsuki snapped. "I was investigating." Izuku tried not to laugh. "You mean stalking?" Katsuki ignored that. "You moved like you. Hesitated like you. Jumped in like an idiot like you. You even talked like you giving villains therapy in the middle of fights." Izuku covered his face, groaning. "Oh my god." Katsuki continued, smug now. "One video caught you helping a stray cat mid-patrol. A cat, nerd. In the middle of a weapons deal. The cat was stuck in a fence." Katsuki threw his hands up. "Exactly. Who else but you would interrupt a stakeout to rescue a cat and then apologize to the criminals for making them wait?" Izuku sputtered, flustered. Okay, I get it." Katsuki's voice dropped, more serious. "I couldn't prove it. Not at first. And if I was wrong, I wasn't gonna risk your life over a gut feeling." Izuku looked at him, quieter now. "But when you knew for sure?" Katsuki clicked his tongue. "I wanted to hit you. Hard. For lying. For running yourself into the ground. For being you. A pause. Then softer, but I also didn't want anyone else to figure it out first. Because if they did, his jaw clenched. They wouldn't have hesitated. Izuku blinked, absorbing his words. Katsuki leaned back, arms crossed again. That's why I transferred. Why I stayed close. Izuku's heart raced, a mix of horror and awe swelling within him. Kaken, you did all that just to watch over me. Katsuki scoffed. Don't make it sound soft. But he didn't deny it. Izuku's voice wavered. You could have exposed me. You hated vigilantes. I still do, Katsuki muttered. Izuku blinked. But, Katsuki added, quieter, I hate the system worse. His voice turned sharp. The system that lets people like us suffer. That turns heroes into tools. That took your mom. That nearly broke you. His hands gripped the railing tighter. You think I like that you're out there without backup, without a license. That you're breaking laws just to do what's right. I hate it, Deku. I hate that you had to become this. He turned to him again. I hate that you're a vigilante. But I hate the broken system that forced you into becoming one even more. Izuku didn't cry this time. But his eyes shone. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully, and bumped his head against Katsuki's shoulder. Thank you, Kaken. Katsuki didn't respond right away, but his head tilted slightly, resting against Izuku's. Izuku's chest tightened, his eyes stinging again, but he didn't cry. Instead, he smiled, shaky and overwhelmed. You really watched all those clips? Katsuki groaned. Are you gonna keep asking that? Izuku laughed under his breath, cheeks still pink. Katsuki muttered in disbelief, believe it. You're not exactly low profile when you shout, you can still be better, mid-swing. Izuku covered his face, feeling embarrassed. Oh my god, I'm never showing my face again. Too late. I already know what it looks like under the mask. After a moment, Katsuki added with a hint of smugness, scar under your lip gives it away every time. Izuku felt himself melting into the railing, completely flustered and blushing. You're impossible, he said, a smile creeping onto his face. For the first time since his mom passed away, he felt something close to peace, something like relief. The silence stretched on, too long and too still. The city lights blinked in the distance, neon reflections dancing in their eyes, but neither of them noticed. They stood so close that the space between them barely existed. Izuku's breath hitched as he sensed the shift, that unspoken current pulling between them. Katsuki hadn't moved much, just slightly, but suddenly his face was right there, inches away. Close enough for Izuku to see the flecks of gold in his eyes, the scar above his brow, and the way his lashes flickered as his gaze dropped to Izuku's lips. Katsuki's gaze lingered on Izuku, memories flooding back of moments filled with pain and whispered apologies. Now, the atmosphere was quiet, soft, and NTMT closer than they had ever been. Katsuki felt a surge of emotions, something deeper and more intense than nerves. A shiver ran down his spine, a sense of urgency prickling beneath his skin. It was as if something was watching them, drawing closer. In a decisive move, Katsuki wrapped his arm around Izuku's waist, pulling him tightly against his chest. Inside. Now, he commanded. Izuku barely had time to process Katsuki's words before he was being led back through the rooftop door with a sense of urgency, the door slamming shut behind them. The latch clicked into place, plunging them into silence. Katsuki remained tense, one hand poised near his gauntlet while the other held Izuku's arm firmly. Izuku, breathless, tried to ask what was happening, but Katsuki silenced him with a soft, shoo. Katsuki moved toward the window slit, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the skyline. He could sense something out there, an unsettling feeling creeping under his skin. He didn't know how or who, but he was certain that something had found them. And Katsuki Bakugo never ignored his instincts. Kaijin's lair, surveillance core. The chamber buzzed faintly with the low hum of machinery, walls lined with blinking data conduits and glowing veins of wire, resembling the nervous system of something alive. Kaijin didn't look up when the door opened. "Report," he said simply. A sharp pair of boots echoed against the floor as the lieutenant stepped forward, face masked, eyes unblinking behind his visor. "We found them." Kaijin stilled and slowly turned. "Where?" "Rooftop, downtown sector. The old district, north of the Takoba perimeter." The lieutenant pulled a remote and clicked once. The nearest monitor shifted grainy, then sharpened. Two figures bathed in muted city light, Bakugo Katsuki and Midoriya Izuku, side by side. Kaijin's expression remained unchanged, but the atmosphere tightened, like pressure dropping before a storm. The lieutenant cleared his throat, uneasily. They were talking. Not just allies. It looked personal. Kaijin said nothing. The screens around him flickered fractals of surveillance feeds, heat maps pulsing like artificial veins, neural traces ghosting across outlines of bodies. He stared at the feed, watching as Bakugo's arm moved around Midoriya's back, protective and intentional. The audio crackled, distorted and barely intelligible, but the posture told enough. Bakugo wasn't interrogating, he was holding him. Kaijin's lips curled slowly. "Ah," he breathed, eyes glimmering in the dark. "So even the brute can sense it." The largest monitor froze on a single frame, Katsuki standing inches from Izuku, his body blocking the wind, shielding him. Kaijin stepped forward and tapped the glass once, then again. "Loyal dog." The words hissed out of him like steam from a cracked pipe. He tilted his head slightly, mockingly, eyes full of venom. He was supposed to hunt the vigilante. Not cradle him. A finger flicked, and the screen cracked right down Bakugo's face, a single fracture bleeding through the still image like a scar. Kaijin's smile dropped. They assigned a traitor to Ground Zero security. Each word landed like a hammer. He was supposed to terminate Spider-Man. Not protect him. Not care. He turned, the room falling into a mechanical hush, wires twitching like veins beneath skin. Then he made the call. A direct link. Somewhere deep within the heart of Ground Zero Security HQ, a locked drawer buzzed once. A gloved hand reached inside. No name. No ID. Only a single blinking dot. The line connected. A voice on the other end smooth and mechanical. "Yes, Kaijin." Kaijin's teeth gleamed. "You were the one who vouched for Bakugo. No pleasantries. No greetings. You said he was ruthless. Efficient. That he could break bones without breaking rules. Static. I watched him tonight," Kaijin said, low and sharp. "He's compromised." Silence from the other end. Kaijin's voice darkened. "He's protecting the vigilante. Spider-Man still breathes because of him. You told me he would eliminate him." A pause. Cold. Now he's holding him. The gloved hand on the other end flexed. Tight. Still, no denial. Kaijin leaned forward, as if breathing into the wire. "Bring that traitor to me." Click. The line went dead. Kaijin stood in the dark, eyes blazing, a grin pulling across his face, not pleased, not triumphant, but predatory. Izuku Midoriya's mother had only been the beginning. Bakugo Katsuki would be next. He stepped closer to the screen, tapping it again where Katsuki stood in front of Izuku like a wall. "Spider-Man's heart is his weakness," he whispered. "Let's carve it out piece by piece." The massive monitor behind Kaijin lit up, but this time, it wasn't surveillance footage. It was a status log. Code streamed faster than the eye could follow. Project, Arachnemesis ready for deployment. A human-shaped figure stood in the middle of a cylindrical stasis chamber, unmoving and silent. A second skin of carbon black adaptive armor encased his body, spined like a beetle's carapace. Cables fed into his spine. No eyes, just a matte visor that glowed green. A perfect match to Spider-Man's combat silhouette, but colder, wrong. Kaijin smiled as the figure twitched awake. Time to meet your better, Midoriya. Chapter 13, No Way Out. The Ground Zero Security HQ was too quiet, and Katsuki Bakugo knew that was a bad sign. In a place like this, silence meant someone was listening. It all started when he tried to open a secure file about Kaijin's secret operations. The system denied his access, which never happened. He helped build it. That's when he knew something was wrong. Digging deeper, he found a hidden file buried in the system. It wasn't labeled, but Katsuki recognized the coding style right away. He unlocked it in under 4 minutes, and what he saw froze him. It was a combat robot, fast and deadly, moving like Spider-Man, no, like Izuku. Every movement, every reflex, even the hesitation was identical. They had taken Izuku's DNA, his fighting style, his brain patterns, and built a machine designed to hunt and destroy, Nemesis. No humanity. No restraint. Katsuki stood frozen, then scrolled further. Surveillance logs, lab notes, neural override protocols. And at the bottom of the last file an access stamp, Yojiro Shigaraki. The one who vouched for him during intake, the one who assigned him to monitor Spider-Man. Katsuki didn't waste time. He bolted from the secure room, stormed down 2 levels toward the old comms wing. Only 3 places in the building didn't route through the main grid, and all of them were tech relics buried under concrete and arrogance. But the sirens blared before he got there. Lockdown initiated. Security breach. All personnel, stand by. They knew. He ducked under the infrared beam in the stairwell, skidded behind the emergency server racks, and ripped out the auxiliary panel. He inserted the drive. The moment it connected, an encrypted message burst to life, immediately firing off through a hidden channel. Kaijin's building something. Codename, Nemesis. Built from Spider-Man, full override imminent. Mole confirmed, Shigaraki Yojiro. If I go dark, they've captured me. Tell Deku to keep fighting. He hit send without hesitation. A single pulse of encrypted data masked, bounced through ghost nodes, routed away from Ground Zero servers. It would reach them, Ida, Uraraka, Izuku. But not here. Not now. Then Katsuki smashed the phone beneath his boot. If they found their place, the safe house, their only off-grid spot, it would all be over. He drew in a breath and ran. Footsteps echoed behind him, heavy and closing in. But Katsuki didn't stop. Bakugo. Stand down. This is your final warning. Not a chance. He blew through a stairwell door. Alarm lights strobed red. Lockdown barriers slammed shut behind him, metal jaws snapping closed, cutting off retreat. 1 corridor left. Maybe 60 seconds. He ducked into an old maintenance wing choked with dust, long forgotten by security schematics. The building felt wrong now. Too quiet. Like it was holding its breath. And then Yojiro stepped forward, guards at his back. His voice was cold and measured. Funny. I was the one who vouched for you. Said you were ruthless. Precise. Loyal to the mission. He tilted his head slightly, a sneer forming. Guess I was wrong. Katsuki laughed once, low and dangerous. No, you were right. He stepped forward, eyes burning. You just didn't know who I was loyal to, Yojiro said, his demeanor unyielding. You always were emotional. Reckless, Yojiro replied, unfazed. You betrayed us, came the accusation. No, Yojiro stated calmly. I evolved. He stepped forward, asserting his presence. The world doesn't need chaos. It needs obedience. Kaijin provides that. Suddenly, a guard moved, and Katsuki's blast echoed through the air, narrowly missing him and cracking the wall beside his face. You don't bring order. You sell it and feed the public lies, Katsuki growled, his voice low and dangerous. You made people believe they were safe just to tighten the leash. His fists clenched, energy sparking from his palms. You fooled everyone, creating a system that discards anyone who doesn't fit, labeling them as threats, vigilantes, criminals. He stepped closer, ready to strike. Yojiro's expression twisted, a mix of pity and disdain. The good thing is a glitch, Bakugo. Kaijin's perfect order will override it. His smile was cold and calculated. Yojiro leaned in, his voice dripping with malice. We're going to stream your suffering straight into Midoriya's mind, he whispered. Imagine it. Izuku hearing your pain. He'll feel all of it. Katsuki's hands ignited with fierce energy, the heat radiating off him. You want to show him horror? I'll show you hell first. The hallway erupted into chaos. Guards screamed as Katsuki unleashed his fury, fighting like a man with nothing left to lose. But for every opponent he took down, two more appeared, relentless and undeterred. Gas hissed, and tranquilizers struck him. He staggered but pressed on, determination fueling him. Until one final blow caught him off guard, and he fell hard to the ground. Darkness threatened to overtake him as boots thudded around him. Metal cuffs clicked shut, and Yojiro crouched beside him, a smug expression on his face. He leaned closer and whispered, "Don't worry. He'll know it was you screaming." The room was quiet, too quiet. In the heart of the safe house, the lights flickered, and a faint whir echoed through the air. On the console screen, a ghost of a message appeared. Encrypted. Signature, Ground Zero. Uraraka froze mid-step, and Ida leaned over the console. It's from Bakugo, he whispered. A single pulse. The words burned into Izuku's vision, and his hands trembled as he processed the urgency of the message. Kaken, he breathed. No response followed. The message self-erased moments later, leaving Izuku's chest heaving with fury. He's gone, he muttered. They have him. They're going to hurt him. The coffee mug on the table cracked under the pressure of his emotions. Uraraka stepped forward, gripping his arm. Izuku, no. Don't. They took him. They knew. This is because of me. His voice rose, fierce and shaking, energy crackling around him. He sent that message so we wouldn't walk into the same trap. He planned for this. Katsuki Bakugo doesn't go down without a fight, Ida said firmly. Izuku stared at him, breath shallow and fury choking him. Uraraka stepped closer. This is what Kaijin wants. For you to break. For your emotions to make you reckless. To come charging in without a plan so they can crush you both. That stopped him. Barely. But Uraraka continued gently, if we lose it now, we lose everything. Bakugo believed you could outthink them. Don't let his message be the last thing he ever sends. Izuku's shoulders slumped, slowly and reluctantly. I'm not giving up on him, he said. Good, Ida replied. Then let's do this smart. He turned to the console, fingers flying across the keys. We have one traceable lead, Yojiro. The agency had an off-grid bunker he frequented for neural sync testing. Kaijin's experiments may be based there. Uraraka nodded. If they're uploading something, they need infrastructure. Power. Isolation. A clean feed. We start with everything tied to Yojiro's access history. Izuku's fists unclenched, not calm but focused. We find the base, we find Kaijin, and we get Kaken back. Ida typed quickly, eyes locked on the screen. I traced a signal from Yojiro. It leads to an old lab outside the city, disguised as a shut-down hydro station. Uraraka leaned closer. What's there? Powerful tech. Neural links. This isn't just a hideout, Ida explained. It's a control center. Izuku's voice was quiet. They're uploading something. He stood up fast, ready to go, but Ida grabbed his arm. You know it's a trap. I don't care. No, Uraraka said firmly, stepping in front of him. You do care. That's why we're here. Izuku's jaw clenched. We don't rush in, Ida insisted. We go in low. Quiet. We cut their signal first. Izuku stared at the glowing screen, his reflection looking tired and hollow. Then he spoke quietly. You guys shouldn't come with me. Silence fell. Uraraka and Ida looked up, confusion on their faces. Midoriya, Ida said slowly. You'll need backup, Uraraka added. Navigation, surveillance if something goes wrong, that's exactly why. His voice cracked under the weight of his emotions. He turned to them, green eyes fierce with fear and resolve. I already lost too much. I can't lose you both too. A breath escaped him, his chest rising and shoulders rigid. You two, you're my best friends. My family. If something happens to you because of me, Izuku, Uraraka tried, reaching out. I appreciate everything. All the times you stayed, fought, believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Izuku forced a thin smile, trembling at the edges. But Kaken saved me. I have to do this. Uraraka and Ida didn't argue. They understood. Ida pulled out a small earpiece with a glowing core. Use this. We made it last year. It's untraceable and will keep us connected. Uraraka handed him a bracelet. It'll ping us if you're trapped. We'll find you. Promise. Izuku blinked, surprised. You made this yourselves. Ida adjusted his glasses with a hint of pride. We built it during that science fellowship last year, remember? The one no one believed we could finish. We might not be official scientists yet, but we're definitely future Nobel candidates, Uraraka added. Izuku blinked, startled. Seriously? You two are giving me spy gear you made in your free time. Hey, Uraraka grinned. Some people knit. We build surveillance tech. It's called balance, Ida said, deadpan. Izuku took them both slowly, reverently. Thank you, guys, he whispered. I mean it. Uraraka gave him a sharp nod, her voice soft but sure. You bring him back. And when you locate Kaijin, Ida added, you don't end it alone. Izuku pressed the earpiece into place, ready for what lay ahead. His fingers closed around the bracelet. He declared his intention to save him, turning toward the darkness. I promise, he said, and without another word, he vanished into the night. The sky was ablaze, webbed in fiery strands that flickered between towering buildings, leaving neon scars on the city skyline. Structures crumbled in a slow, horrifying descent, with the sounds of metal screaming and glass shattering echoing like falling stars. Below, chaos reigned. Sirens wailed, drones buzzed overhead, and people ran in panic, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning concrete. Amidst the turmoil, Arachnemesis emerged, silhouetted against a blazing high-rise. His form mirrored Izuku's lean, agile, and fast, but something was off. His joints moved too sharply, and his head tilted unnaturally slow. Behind a sleek, mirrored mask, Izuku's face was twisted into something soulless. Izuku stood on the edge of a building, breathing heavily, his knuckles white as he watched the scene unfold. The relay buzzed in his ear, and Ida's voice cut through the chaos. Arachnemesis is just a distraction. They're uploading something big. Izuku, listen. Before Izuku could respond, every screen in the city flickered to life, revealing Katsuki's face bruised and bloodied, strapped to a steel slab, struggling against neural clamps. His mouth opened in a raw scream, abruptly cut off by static, followed by another guttural cry that tore from his chest. Kaken, Izuku's shoulders trembled, fingers going limp as he watched the torment play out on every screen. Katsuki was trapped, his muscles convulsing under neural feedback, sweat and blood running down his temple. It was a horrifying sight. Then a voice echoed, sending a chill through Izuku. "Where's your hero now?" The Ground Zero security soldiers had orders to shoot him on sight. Those not involved with Kaijin's inner circle still viewed him as a criminal. They descended from airships, flooding the streets, flanking alleyways with shields and rifles. "Target located," one shouted. Spider-Man in sector. Izuku stood frozen, breathing sharply, his gaze locked on the footage of Katsuki's suffering. He could save the world or save his world, and for a moment, he didn't know which to choose. But before the first soldier could raise a weapon, a fire extinguisher flew from the shadows, hitting the ground with a clang and releasing a cloud of smoke. "Stop!" Uraraka's voice pierced through the chaos as she sprinted into view, Ida right behind her, both armed with gear they shouldn't have had. Uraraka yanked a cable from the drone's remains, rerouting its signal mid-run, while Ida slid beside her, raising a hand-built EMP cannon glowing faint blue. "We're not letting you take him," Ochako shouted. "We know what Kaijin's doing. You're being used. Spider-Man is not the enemy." Izuku turned, eyes wide as the broadcast shifted, not Iraq Nemesis, not Katsuki's scream, but Kaijin's voice. Spliced audio, data leaks, blueprints. The evidence Uraraka and Ida had uncovered was now broadcasted across the city through hijacked surveillance towers. Yojiro's voice admitted the truth, revealing his conversation with Katsuki. "The world doesn't need chaos. It needs obedience. Kaijin brings that. You don't bring order. You sell it and feed the public lies. You made people believe they were safe just to tighten the leash." A silent wave rolled through the city, and people began stepping out. An old vendor pulled his kiosk into the street to block a convoy. A bike courier dropped a smoke charge, and a teenage girl rewired a street cam to evade drone tracking. One man raised a radio, his voice shaking. "He saved my daughter from a fire. I don't care what they call him. He's a hero." A mother joined in, holding her child's hand. "He pulled my son from a wreck when no one else came." Dozens, then hundreds filled the streets, not a mob, but a movement. "Help Spider-Man," someone shouted, just like in the old videos. Suddenly, Izuku, who had been on the verge of giving up, could breathe again. He stood slowly, knees shaking, mind still reeling from the footage. But he saw it now, the real power lay not in suits or technology, but in memory, love, and the people still willing to believe. He turned to Ida and Uraraka, his best friends, tech-savvy future scientists in repurposed lab gear. "We're not letting you do this alone," Uraraka said firmly. "But we're not naive either." Ida handed him a small black device. "Encrypted live relay. We'll guide you. You'll hear us. You'll never be alone." Izuku took it, feeling crushed yet thankful. "You two are wasted as engineers," he smiled shakily. "You're basically resistance leaders." "Yeah, well," Uraraka winked, "we're also nerds with access to abandoned military prototypes." They shared one last look before Izuku pulled his mask back down. The world was burning, but Spider-Man was back in the fight, and this time, he had the whole city behind him. Chapter 15, The Clash. The city was in chaos. Sirens wailed across broken concrete and shattered windows, but for the first time, they weren't chasing Spider-Man, they were clearing his path. "All units," a dispatcher shouted over the police radio, "hold formation and open a corridor down 11th, Spider-Man's en route to the target. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." Izuku ran across rooftops, launching web lines that cut through the skyline like BLD vessels over a wounded heart. His chest burned, legs numb, but he didn't stop. Somewhere beneath the city, Katsuki was still in pain. The last broadcast haunted him. Katsuki's body limp, electricity arcing across muscle and bone, an Iraq nemesis mimicking Izuku's every move. But he wasn't running from that, he was running toward it. As he passed the final police barricade, officers saluted him. Some whispered, some nodded. One shouted, "Give him hell, Spider-Man!" Izuku didn't look back. The lab loomed ahead, a decommissioned Hydro Research Center turned black site fortress. Its steel gates had been blown open by coordinated resistance teams, the ground trembling beneath him. Above it all, atop the tower rising from the lab, Arachnemesis awaited. The clash was immediate. Izuku crashed through the tower's glass spire like a war cry, landing just as Arachnemesis launched off a support beam with inhuman speed. Arachnemesis dove forward, wings splitting from its back, mechanical and razor-edged, gleaming. It hovered like a predator before diving down. Izuku didn't hesitate. The first punch was a blur, the second a counterstrike. Webs met acidic cables, fists collided with mirrored fury. Every move Izuku made, Arachnemesis anticipated, as if he were fighting his own shadow, one strppd of mercy. One wired to win. Blow after blow. Arachnemesis hurled Izuku into a steel pillar, causing the tower to groan. Izuku coughed, feeling the sting of pain. "You feel pain. You slow down." "I do not," the machine voice grated like static. Izuku stood up, gritting his teeth. "Exactly. That's why you'll lose." They collided again, a blur of fists, webbing, claws, and rage. The tower cracked around them, sparks raining down like falling stars. Kaken. Always Kaken. Izuku could see his face in every blink, hear his voice, remember that rooftop. "But even I know something worth saving when I see it." He wouldn't let those words be the last. He wouldn't lose him. Arachnemesis flew in a wide arc, crashing through steel beams and sending waves of destructive shock through the structure. Izuku web-zipped upward, dodging and flipping, grabbing a broken girder and swinging it into Arachnemesis's chest. The impact barely stalled it. Arachnemesis recovered mid-air, wings burning, and tackled Izuku through the side of the tower. They crashed into scaffolding, falling 2 levels before webbing slowed the descent. Izuku ducked under a sweep, slid between acid webs, and latched both web shooters to Arachnemesis's arms. "Override this," he muttered, then yanked. A surge of electricity coursed through the lines of feedback loop Ida designed just for this. The synthetic Spider-Man convulsed, its systems stuttering. Izuku jumped, delivering one last punch, all his weight, all his fury, all his heart right through the adaptive mask. Arachnemesis crashed into the far wall, sparks erupting from its core. It launched forward, wings splitting from its back, mechanical and whirring with violence. It hovered in midair like a demon carved from Izuku's nightmares. The moment it dove, it was like 2 comets crashing. Izuku's body flung back from the force, but he caught himself with a web line and somersaulted midair. Arachnemesis was already there, slamming him against a girder, webbed with acid that hissed on contact. Izuku barely twisted away as it melted through steel. He dove down the tower, but Arachnemesis pursued, spinning, turning, matching every move. Arachnemesis caught him mid-fall and threw him through a wall. Concrete cracked, and Izuku felt pain radiate through his back. Every pattern. Every reflex. Every failure, its voice echoed, distorted. "You're predictable. Weak. Flawed." Izuku launched 2 webs at a pipe overhead and yanked hard. Steam burst outward, clouding vision. He zipped behind the machine, grabbing it by the throat and flipping it into the steel floor. "Flawed," he hissed, panting. "Maybe. But I'm real." Arachnemesis turned its head unnaturally slow. "Then die like a real hero." Blades snapped from its wrists, slashing wildly. One tore through Izuku's suit. He stumbled, coughing, and Arachnemesis kicked him into the ceiling. Izuku's body hit steel hard. The tower groaned, and fire bloomed on the lower levels. He hung there webbed and bloodied and watched as Arachnemesis rose slowly, limbs resetting with sickening pops. But above the pain, louder than his own heartbeat, Katsuki's scream echoed in his memory. Izuku's fingers trembled. Not yet. Not ever. He ripped off the cracked lens on his mask, staring his double in the eye. "You're not me." Izuku dashed forward, using everything physics, misdirection, instinct. He webbed scaffolding, weaponized the environment. Arachnemesis adapted, but slower now, fragments sparking, acid leaking from shoulder ports. Then he lured Arachnemesis into the tower's lightning rod chamber. A moment of perfect timing. Izuku dodged one final strike, fired a reinforced web line around the machine's midsection and dove out of the way just as lightning ripped through the chamber. The rod struck Arachnemesis directly. The machine howled, convulsing, systems shorting in every direction. Izuku watched, panting, as the synthetic body collapsed, twitching and sparking. Then silence. He stepped forward, eyes burning. "You were built to replace me," he whispered. "But you were never human enough to win." Izuku stood over the wreck of Arachnemesis, his breathing ragged, BLD matting his curls. The synthetic doppelganger hissed static from its cracked voice modulator, flickering like a dying scream. Then a buzz in his ear. "Izuku. Can you hear us?" Ida's voice cut through, strained but clear. "Why, yeah, I took it down." "Good. But that wasn't the core. We were wrong, Kaijin isn't here." Uraraka's voice broke in next. "We traced the redirected data stream. He's in the deep sector of the Ouroboros site. A defunct geothermal lab 200 meters beneath the city." Izuku froze. "Katsuki's signal is still active," Ida continued. "He's alive." "Barely. We think Kaijin moved him as backup in case Arachnemesis failed." Izuku's hand clenched. "Coordinates." "Sending now," Ida replied. "Follow the elevator down. You'll find an emergency access tunnel near the reactor vent. It leads to the sub-platform. From there you'll find Kaijin," Uraraka finished, voice steadier now. "And Bakugo." Izuku swallowed thickly, throat dry. "Thanks. Remember, you are not alone," Uraraka said gently. "We're still in your ear. And the whole city's clearing the path." Izuku cracked a smile through his pain. "Future scientists, huh? With future GPS hacks and illegal tunnel maps," Ida muttered, then sighed. "We'll guide you in." "So go," Uraraka said. "Go get him." Izuku didn't hesitate. He tore through the last of the rubble, darted toward the broken elevator cables and dove. The fight wasn't over. Not yet. Not until he brought Katsuki home. The elevator was a vertical coffin of rusted steel and groaning metal. Izuku descended fast, webbing to cable, flipping between the narrow walls, sensors pulsing in his mask with Ida's NAV data lighting the corners of his HUD. He slammed his boots into a wall panel and yanked himself into a side corridor pitch dark, except for emergency floodlights glowing red like veins. The air was hot. "Wrong. We're seeing interference," Ida's voice crackled. "Signal distortions climbing, might be a Faraday cage system. Deep shielding." "Just keep talking," Izuku muttered, sprinting low through the narrowing tunnel. "Izuku," Uraraka chimed in, but her voice was faint, clipped at the edge. "We're right, you, static." Izuku slowed. His HUD glitched. Audio cut in and out like a bad dream. "Signal dropping, can't boost," he stopped. Then Ida's voice cut in one last time, fraying at the edges. "The deeper you go, the less we can reach you. This might be the farthest, Izuku, this is where we stop." The signal blinked out. Izuku stood in the red glow silence. His breath echoed back at him. The hallway ahead pulsed faintly, low mechanical hums vibrating through the walls. Everything smelled of ozone, coolant, and the unmistakable static scorch of prototype tech. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat and stepped forward. Down below, behind the thickest shielding in the facility, Izuku found it. Kaijin's real lair. The guards had been taken down, arrested by the rest of GZS. Uraraka and Ida had exposed everything. Now it was just Kaijin. Kaijin and Katsuki. Bakugo's body was suspended midair strapped to a neural rig, chest rising weakly. Electrodes dug into his temples. Tubes lined his spine. His mouth was gagged. His scream was silent, but Izuku could hear it. Kaijin turned from the console, almost casual. His smile was thin. Poetic, isn't it? The hero watches. And all he can do is choose which one to save. Izuku's mask peeled back, revealing eyes that were glassy, yet fire burned behind them. I chose both. He lunged. The fight was chaotic. Kaijin didn't fight fair, using electric whips, psychic inhibitors, and feedback spikes to paralyze muscle. But Izuku moved through it all, dodging, weaving, and bleeding until he reached the rig. He ripped the tubes out, tore the straps, and Katsuki fell into his arms. Got you, Izuku breathed. Katsuki coughed weakly, blood spattering his chin. Took you long enough, dumbass. A surge of movement. Kaijin attacked. But this time, another hand caught him. Katsuki. Still shaking. Still burnt. But alive. Ready. And, of course, furious. You like control, huh? Katsuki's fist glowed, wired rig still wrapped to his arm like a gauntlet. Then rot in yours. He punched Kaijin into the reactor core. Light exploded. Kaijin's scream echoed. Then, silence. Katsuki collapsed into Izuku again. This time, Izuku held him tighter and didn't let go. But it wasn't over. The facility groaned around them, fail-safes activating, reactors surging. Kaijin's AI protocols began to reroute. His neural consciousness, fragmented but clinging, tried to upload one last command. Final upload. Initializing protocol, world order. Lights flickered. Somewhere in the walls, machinery screamed. Sparks spat from exposed wires. Kaijin's AI was still running, still trying to complete the upload. A voice echoed from the central terminal, protocol world order, 89% upload. Lockout imminent. Then Kaijin laughed, crawling from the wreckage of the blast shielding, face half burned from the exposed wiring Katsuki had torn loose. Even if you kill me, the new world's already coming. You can't stop it. Izuku stepped forward, but Katsuki stopped him with a hand. He pushed off Izuku's shoulder, limping, burned, but eyes blazing. Nah, Katsuki growled. We're not gonna kill you. Kaijin's smile faltered. We're gonna erase you. Kaijin stumbled back, but there was nowhere to go. The lab's core, a pit of grinding gears and exposed fans, loomed behind him. So now you're gonna scream, Katsuki growled, dragging himself forward with every ounce of strength, fists clenched. Izuku didn't stop him. Kaijin lunged with a jagged neural spike, screaming, you can't stop evolution. And Katsuki moved with rage. He slammed his shoulder into Kaijin, sending both of them skidding across the floor. They grappled. Kaijin swung the spike down, but Katsuki caught his wrist mid-swing and headbutted him. Kaijin screamed. Katsuki didn't let go. He dragged him back by the collar, across shattered glass and sparking wires, and slammed him against the reactor failsafe panel. Sparks burst out in a blinding flash. The power pulsed beneath their feet. Kaijin choked, spitting blood. I already uploaded. Katsuki's lip curled into a sneer. Dead loop, he spat. Rerouted it before I even hit the floor. You're not a god, you're a virus. He slammed him again. And I'm deleting you. One final punch. Straight to Kaijin's temple. All of Katsuki's pain. All the humiliation. All the agony Izuku was forced to watch. Kaijin's legs buckled. He stumbled backward, staggering toward the edge of the reactor pit, arms flailing. Wait. His heel slipped, and Kaijin fell into the core. The room lit up like a sun tearing through metal. Gears shrieked. The coils hummed louder and louder until they screamed. The lights went white. A pulse of violent energy surged out, tearing through the lab, blowing out every console. Kaijin hit the turbines. The scream was not human. The magnetic field surged, fusing Kaijin's own tech into his body as it cooked from the inside out. His fingers clawed upward, but the heat took them first. His cybernetic jaw melted, leaving one last horror-wide scream frozen as his body combusted. The reactor burst. A dome of shockwave and light blew outward. And then silence. Dust. The flicker of emergency lights. The hiss of steam. Katsuki collapsed forward to his knees. Izuku caught him, barely. Both of them were still bleeding. Still coughing. But breathing. "You're insane," Izuku muttered, half laughing, half sobbing. Katsuki wheezed a breath, then grinned, BLD on his teeth. "Yeah. Still saved your nerdy butt." Again. They both laughed, tired, guttural, aching. They sat there in the wreckage, scorched. And bruised. The villain was gone. But the world, they had to rebuild it. Together. Then the ceiling creaked, a deep, groaning sound, and a fresh cascade of sparks fell from the ruptured core behind them. Izuku's head snapped up. "Okay," he panted, eyes darting around. "Okay, we gotta move. Like, now. Or we're gonna get burned in here." Katsuki barely lifted his head. "TCH. I'm fine, just gimme a second. You've had several. We're about to be extra crispy if we don't go kakin, I'm not kidding." He hooked one arm around Katsuki's waist and yanked him up. "The hell are you doing?" Katsuki barked, flinching. "I can walk, you can't." "You're literally smoking," Izuku snapped, then shot a web up toward the last stable beam overhead. "No, you're smoking, dumbass, shut up and hold on." With a sudden jolt, they were yanked into the air, Katsuki growling into Izuku's shoulder the whole way up. "I swear to God, if you crash us into something, less yelling, more surviving." Izuku grinned, even through the BLD and ash on his face. They flew up and out through the burning gap in the reactor shell just as another explosion roared behind them, swallowing the room in light. They didn't look back. Not yet. Not until the sky greeted them again. Cut 2, news broadcasts, global response screens across Times Square, Shibuya Crossing, London, Manila, Seoul, all streaming the same footage, Spider-Man carrying a barely conscious Katsuki out of the wreckage. Reporters narrate over slow-motion clips. After months of chaos, the manhunt, the misinformation, today, the world saw the truth. The masked vigilante Spider-Man labeled a threat was our last defense against something far worse. The tower smolders. Emergency crews begin to arrive. People are cheering in the distance. News drones circle overhead, broadcasting Izuku and Katsuki, side by side, crawling out of the wreckage. A child clutches a Spider-Man homemade plush. "That's him, he saved us." People begin to chant. "Spider-Man, Spider-Man." Civilians line the sidewalks, holding up homemade signs. "Thank you, Spider-Man, he saved my daughter. We see you now." A fireman nods and radios, "Spider-Man gets a clean slate. You copy." Backup lights flickered on, casting the scorched lab in a pale, eerie glow. The air was thick with smoke and the sharp scent of melted steel. Katsuki was barely conscious, but he was alive. Breathing. Burning, bleeding, but alive. Izuku held on to him like a lifeline, forehead resting against Katsuki's for a heartbeat. Just one. On the nearby rooftop, just across from the shattered tower, Uraraka and Ida stood side by side. The sky had finally begun to turn gold, sunlight bleeding across the broken skyline, touching the smoldering lab, the police lights, and the two figures curled in its heart. Izuku, mask still on. Katsuki, leaning against him. Both barely upright, bruised but alive. Whole. Safe. Uraraka swallowed the lump in her throat, fists clenched at her sides. She whispered, I want to run to them so bad. Ida didn't look away. So do I. She took one step forward but then stopped. Cameras hovered below, drones zoomed around. The world was watching. Their secrets still held, barely. If they moved now, it could shatter. So instead, they stayed on the rooftop, the wind brushing their clothes, the light warming their backs. But it was enough. Seeing Izuku alive. Seeing Katsuki breathe. Seeing them both, together, still holding on. Uraraka smiled, soft and filled with emotion. They did it. Ida nodded, his chest heavy with pride. Behind them, the city finally began to breathe again. Hope, slowly, settling in. Spider-Man battered, scorched, costume torn knelt beside the barely conscious Katsuki Bakugo, who leaned against him injured, yet somehow smiling. Not a smug grin, but soft and gentle, as if he were home. The noise around them blurred sirens, distant cheers, the buzz of a drone camera zooming in. Katsuki looked up and squinted at the crowd gathered beyond the torn tower gates. He gave them a slow, crooked wave. Dumbass, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for the mic feed to catch. Izuku stared at him, feeling something in his chest crack open like his heart had finally caught up with his head. All the years of yelling and chasing and never saying the right thing had led to this moment. And suddenly, it made sense. It wasn't complicated. It was Kaken. Izuku let out a breathless laugh, his eyes shining. Then, soft and a little foolish with love, he said, I love you. Katsuki's eyes blinked slowly. Ha! Izuku froze. There were sirens, drones, and a very large hover camera nearby. Oh my God, the crowd started to whisper. I believe Spider-Man just confessed, someone shouted. Izuku's entire body locked up. Wait, is this still live? Katsuki, still barely breathing, let out a soft wheeze that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. You're such a dramatic idiot. Izuku's soul nearly launched itself into the stratosphere. Wait, I didn't. That wasn't. A nearby drone zoomed in, and microphones clicked. News anchors were already preparing to report. I meant it in a general sense. Izuku shouted. Like a heroic kind of love. Like, love thy neighbor, love. Katsuki blinked slowly at him, the corner of his mouth twitching like he was trying not to laugh and failing. Right. Sure. Izuku, still in his suit and mask, buried his face in his gloved hands, murmuring, CRP. I forgot I'm still Spider-Man. Why did I say that out loud? From somewhere above, the city roared. People on the streets were cheering. A woman on a balcony shouted, Hey, I know that guy. He is Bakugo Katsuki from Ground Zero Security. Spider-Man loves Bakugo. Katsuki huffed a breath through bruised ribs, the corner of his mouth twitching in amusement. You're such a nerd. Do you ever shut up? Izuku was still flailing. Okay, I can salvage this. Maybe if I just swing away really fast maybe people will think it was a glitch, but Katsuki was already moving. Slowly, painfully, he reached up and tugged at Izuku's mask just a bit to reveal the edge of his mouth. Wait, what are you? Katsuki didn't answer. He just leaned in and kissed him right there, in front of the cameras, the drones, the police, and half of Tokyo. Izuku froze. The world did not. Screams erupted from the barricades. The rooftop crowd absolutely lost their minds. Oh my good. He kissed Spider-Man, he kissed Spider-Man. People were throwing confetti. Drones swarmed like flies. Somewhere, a grandma shouted, That's romance, baby. Uraraka screamed on the rooftop. I knew it. I knew it. Ida short-circuited beside her, glasses fogging. There's a camera zooming in. Uraraka clutched the railing, overwhelmed. Ida caught her before she could collapse. Breathe. Just breathe. You're witnessing history. Down below, Izuku pulled back from the kiss, blinking in awe. I did not see that coming. Katsuki smirked, utterly unbothered. You said it. Figured I'd help you commit. Izuku buried his face in his hands again. I'm never living this down. Katsuki slumped against him, half-conscious but totally unbothered. Don't wanna. Above them, on every live stream, the headlines blared, Spider-Man and Bakugo Katsuki, in love. Numerous hashtags began trending worldwide. And even as cameras flashed and people cheered, Izuku couldn't stop smiling. Because despite everything flames, wreckage, secrets, and spotlights, Katsuki was here. He was safe. And he was his. The battle was over. The world had seen it all: Spider-Man's final fight, Katsuki's rescue, and the confession that echoed across every screen. Now, the world was buzzing with questions. Spider-Man. Is it true you and Katsuki Bakugo are dating? Bakugo, can you tell us what it's like dating Tokyo's favorite hero? Will there be a wedding in the sky? Meanwhile, Katsuki Bakugo had become the new chief of Ground Zero security. The world now saw him as a survivor, a war hero, and the man who had walked out of the wreckage with Tokyo's most beloved hero in his arms. As for Uraraka and Ida, they were recruited by the world's top science and tech institutions within a week. Officially. We were just trying to help Spider-Man. Yeah, we don't even know him personally, they said in an interview, smiling like they hadn't helped rear out a synthetic consciousness using lab scraps and a cracked comm. They were dubbed the genius sidekicks by the media. Unofficially. They were in it all the way. Izuku, though. Still the same. The scholarship science nerd with ink-stained fingers. He still submitted lab reports early, kept his dorm room perfectly organized, and wore oversized hoodies with chemical burn marks. But it was enough. He had Uraraka. He had Ida. And he had Katsuki. Sure, it was hard being Spider-Man and having a boyfriend whose name was now plastered across the world like a meme-worthy power couple. But actually, it had its perks. On hero duty, Izuku could still swing by Katsuki's balcony, upside down, flowers in one hand and a cheesy grin under the mask. Kiss for the city's symbol of peace, he'd ask. Katsuki would roll his eyes, grumble, curse under his breath, and tug his mask up just enough to reveal his lips. Then kiss him anyway. Win-win. Oh, and Spider-Man. He was no longer a vigilante. No longer hunted. He was the symbol of peace. Tokyo's most beloved hero. And after everything, the four of them met again, far from the cameras and chaos, in the quiet of their secret hideout. Still a team. Still home. It had been renovated, upgraded tech, stronger walls, even a coffee machine Katsuki threatened to destroy every time it beeped too loud. It was their retreat. Their HQ. Their home base. Katsuki had unofficially, then very officially, taken over as team lead. He never admitted it, but everyone knew he made backup plans for their backup plans. He made Ida run evacuation drills, for fun, labeled the snack drawer, classified materials, and grumbled when Uraraka used the strategy board for doodling hearts around his and Izuku's names. Brats, he muttered every time they grouped up. And yet you still keep showing up, Izuku pointed out once, smug. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Someone's gotta supervise the nerd circus. The city healed, slowly. Scars still marked buildings and hearts, but people smiled more now. The air felt lighter. Tokyo wasn't perfect, but it had hope. And at the center of that hope was Spider-Man. Izuku continued to be the friendly neighborhood hero, swinging through alleyways and rooftops, stopping muggers, catching falling debris, and helping lost tourists find the right train station. Kids pointed at him in wonder, cafes left him thank you notes, and aunties handed him bento boxes when he landed nearby. He was a hero with a crooked grin and a heart too big for his chest, a protector and a friend. Katsuki ensured the city rebuilt itself properly, implementing safer systems and smarter defenses. Some of the technology had Izuku's handwriting scribbled in the margins. People moved on, but they didn't forget. Street vendors painted murals, and school kids wore green and black pins with pride. Katsuki Bakugo, chief of GZS, known for his grumpy demeanor but also his caring nature, stood by Spider-Man's side at press conferences, on rooftops, and in the heart of danger. Their relationship was messy, real, and brilliant, becoming the kind that tabloids obsessed over and civilians rooted for. In the field, they were a storm, strategic and efficient, moving in sync with just one look. But behind closed doors, they were soft. Katsuki would grumble about Izuku leaving his mask on the kitchen table, while Izuku would ramble about particle decay until Katsuki silenced him with a kiss. Laundry got mixed up, dishes were half-washed, and there were half-written post-it notes on the fridge. There were nights when Izuku came home bruised, and Katsuki would clean every cut in silence, brushing Izuku's hair back gently. There were mornings when Katsuki woke up panting, and Izuku held him until he remembered he was safe. They spent nights cuddled on the couch, bickering over movie choices, and Izuku once woke up under 3 blankets and Katsuki's hoodie after passing out mid-rant. Sometimes Izuku would help Katsuki with grocery shopping in his Spider-Man suit, and Katsuki pretended not to notice the paparazzi. Once, Izuku webbed a reporter to a stop sign for asking if their love life was part of the job. They learned to fight not just for the city, but for each other, building something real. They laughed, they fought, they made up. They lived. As the sun rose over Tokyo, its skyline bathed in gold, Izuku, already in his Spider-Man suit, would tug up his mask halfway, lean in, and kiss Katsuki gently by the window. "I love you, Kaken," he would say. Katsuki, half-buttoned in his GZS shirt and still soft from sleep, would grunt, "Don't die and try not to crash into any billboards today, nerd." "No promises," Izuku would grin, swinging off the balcony into the golden light, shooting a web to the nearest antenna and launching himself into the sky with an exaggerated, woohoo. "Good morning, Tokyo." Katsuki watched from the window, arms crossed, as Izuku flipped midair and swung wide, nearly missing a passing drone. "What a nerd," he muttered, a smile tugging at his lips. He shook his head, grabbed his keys, and slung his bag over one shoulder. The door clicked shut, and the apartment stilled, but it never stayed empty for long. Each night, without fail, when the city began to quiet, and neon turned to starlight, 2 figures would return. One through the door and one through the window. And always, always back to each other. To warmth, to laughter, to bickering and noodles, to the home they built. To forever.